is this?
I just had to sit behind somebody that decided to park at the pharmacy
So
drive-through.
what do you guys actually do that you can come up here and stare at us for half an hour before the meeting starts?
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to call this meeting to order. On that note, welcome to the March 2nd, 2015 City Council work session. We have obviously a full agenda. We will be taking a break this evening around 5 o'clock. We'll take a very short break, let people go grab something to eat if they care to. We'll go ahead and get started. The first item on our agenda is the adult entertainment ordinance. Mr. Tillman and Mr. Lennox, I know you'll be presenting. We all? Sure. Okay. Bill, are you presenting on this as well? Okay, come join us. Yeah.
You might, no, I'm just gonna. Yeah.
I didn't know if you were just here for the next item.
Ask.
No, please join.
Quite sure you
By
can read it
default.
that way.
You might want to qualify that.
All right. Afternoon, gentlemen. Good afternoon. All right. How shall we begin?
No, just to recap, when we last met, we had presented the proposed two ordinances, one of them amending the regulatory provision with regard to adult entertainment, and the other one regulating the zoning code. And the only issue that was really left unanswered at that point was if these amendments were passed in 2 years from now, when there would be a sunsetting provision, would there be sufficient territory within the city to justify it? Because the First Amendment requires that these businesses not be shut down in their entirety, but they may be regulated as to location and type of use of the property. And because we would be regulating them and applying it retroactively after 2 years, or not retroactively, it would go into effect 2 years from now. The planning department was going to look into whether or not we had other places where these businesses could go.
So there was going to be an update to the mapping.
Right. And we're not really, none of this would change any of the existing law. We're simply reducing, the amount of sales that would define someone as an adult entertainment business. So under that existing code, is there a place already where those businesses could legally locate?
Right.
And I think the answer is yes, but I'll leave that to Mr. Lennon.
Mr. Lennon?
Thank you. As Mr. Tillman mentioned, this is the ordinance that you're considering addresses the change in one of the criteria for what is in fact considered an adult use, and that's changing the percentage and how the floor area is calculated. That, of course, comes under the administrative part of the zoning code, which is why Mr. Holland is here, because Bill has been inside diligently categorizing and calculating, and that's where that figure came from. My only role in this is to perhaps just give you a little bit of background very briefly on the extensive discussions that the council and the city had, I guess 6 or 7 years ago now. We did not zone a particular area, and that was strategic. We did not want to identify an area where these types of uses are acceptable. We did it in reverse. We said which areas deserve the most protection. And so that criteria is in there. It's the separation from the homes and from churches and from daycare. None of that is changing. So we do not have an adult entertainment district. Where it may possibly be acceptable could change from time to time, depending on, as you know, around here, churches tend to start up overnight at times and go away just as quickly. So that criteria could change. We have had, Frank McKenzie has updated the analysis, which is our best guess at this in terms of the inventory of what's out there and the separation. And the estimate at this point, the number was a little over 6% of the city, which seems to be within the percentage guidelines that courts through case law have determined to be acceptable. And there's no enabling statute out there that says follow these rules and you'll be fine. So general guidelines, and I will of course defer to Mr. Tillman and his advice to you about amortization and the defensibility of the 15%, but as far as the rest of the city is concerned, the code is in effect. It has not been challenged, and we on a staff level would deem it to be appropriate.
So, as I understand it, the reduction in the baseline to create a classification or to move a business into a classification as being an adult entertainment business, that will, at that point, once we adopt that, that will cause all businesses to be evaluated at the new standard, correct? So the 15% standard rather than the 20. And then the second change will, the amortization piece will mean that once they're considered an adult entertainment business, they have 2 years to exist in that location if it's not an acceptable location according to the areas that are most protected from those businesses. What it would also allow, correct me if I'm wrong, would a business could comply and have less than 15% and not be an adult entertainment business, correct?
Yes.
Or we could hear an argument that they have less than 15% of any of those three measurements and not be an adult entertainment business, right? And currently, red light district, I'm just going to reference that one by name, is not considered an adult entertainment business, correct?
Correct.
And you have been doing inventories and other evaluations?
Sales, inventories, floor area, we did the whole
Okay.
full scheme, we went and did the inspection there.
Okay. So, in your opinion, from what you've seen there, I mean, are they going to be able to continue operating as a general retail business, or will they have to make significant changes?
They'll have to make changes to how the products are laid out, or the amount of space that's used for those type of sales.
Some of the products that they were selling wouldn't necessarily qualify as adult entertainment material, except for example, the way they're packaged. You know, they would take a product like, you know, women's lingerie and package it with pictures of nude people on the package. So, I mean, they could still sell lingerie, it's just they would not sell it as adult entertainment type material. I mean, and that's, I mean, whenever you use, you know, the nudity that's described in the ordinance to sell any product, it ends up becoming an adult entertainment product just because you're selling it
Sure.
to be one.
Okay. Okay.
So they might make changes in the way they package their products to not display them in that way. But the big thing that we found, you know, in that particular facility was just that they were using huge amounts of vertical wall space
Rather than floor space.
to display and sell products that weren't being counted really.
So my other question though is let's say that they become classified as an adult entertainment business. Let's say all three are adult entertainment businesses. All three are thus subject to the amortization, and 2 years from now, we're staring each other in the face. What is the mechanism for actually forcing a change in use? How do we talk to me about the mechanics of that?
I don't know, I would say it, once the ordinance is passed, the clock starts ticking.
Right.
And I think in all fairness, they should probably be sent a notice informing them of the update to the ordinance.
Okay.
And they have the 2-year period, and once that period expires, and, you know, just like we did the last time, that we was sent notice that, you know, we need to set up a date to come in and do the count again.
Okay. And then let's say that count reveals, I know I'm getting into hypotheticals, but let's say that count reveals that they are an adult entertainment business and they intend to remain an adult entertainment business. And, we're coming up on 2 years in that sort of stasis. What then?
Well, you're gonna have to send them a notice telling them that they no longer comply. And I think that, one of the provisions in this ordinance is the fact that under the zoning code now, there's a provision in here for inspection of the premises and getting an administrative search warrant to do that. And that's being added to the code. So that city officials will be able to get by ordinance, search warrants to go in and make the inspections that are necessary to make that determination.
In theory.
Already, the police can get search warrants now, and, but we're gonna authorize them specifically for this purpose.
Okay.
We haven't had much luck with that with residential. It probably might be a little more willing, the courts may be a little more willing to do that in a commercial situation. The other part of that is, I don't think any of these three own the property that they're in. And what we've been doing in residential is that it's the property owner has an illegal use. Would that be an avenue?
Yeah, in other words.
I
that
mean, if
would
they
be-
refuse to move and they're renewing their lease
Right.
2 weeks before the 2 years is up,
But in order for the city to make the determination, we would need to have some idea whether they fit the criteria or not. And I mean, I think that one way or the other, there's gonna have to be inspections involved prior to making that determination. But once we do, I think they're gonna be, if they are in violation, they're gonna be guilty of a criminal matter for number one. And then, secondly, they'll be guilty of a zoning violation. So we'll have two avenues. We can fine them criminally, and we can order them to vacate the zone where they were located.
Okay.
I guess the question is more about who's in violation? The people operating the business or the people that own the property?
Well, I think it'll be, in the case of the criminal provision, it'll probably be the individual who's operating the business. In the case of the zoning violation, it's gonna be the owner of the property who's allowing it to be used illegally. So, I guess we'll really have the means to go after both. I don't think we'll be holding landlords criminally responsible for operating a building, because they won't be operating. But we certainly will order them to no longer continue the use.
Okay. I just want to make sure that that we've got the right tool in place, I'm fully in support of everything being proposed. Just want to make sure it's going to work. I could see us getting to a point 2 years from now where we're looking across the table from each other, wondering,
Well-
how do we shut your business down? How do we ask you to move? How do we get you to move? Our law says you need to, but
Well, if you want my
Without-
opinion, I think it's gonna result in litigation.
Yeah, one of them has already thumbed their nose at us on
That's true.
multiple
yeah.
fronts,
I
so.
think we may have to resort to the courts, but I think we'll have the tools to do that.
And you think with the, do you think, is the inclusion of the administrative search warrant a tool that you're putting in there because you think it will be approved and we'll be able to use it? Or to show that we were trying to, to show the courts ultimately that the way we structured this was that we were, trying to make this work, that we would be able to inspect and make sure that everyone was in compliance, or is it both?
Well, I think it's always been my position that these administrative search warrants are legal and should be issued even in the case of the housing violations. I mean, the city has never taken that issue to court, other than we've asked and we've been denied, but we've never appealed those decisions, and we've never sought a higher opinion.
Now, I don't want to get too off topic, but we have discussed finding a case to move forward with on that. Is that something we're continuing to explore?
Yeah, I think that would probably be something that would be done through Susan's department. But yes, I think the answer is we do want to pursue that.
Is that something
Yes.
the administration is exploring?
Yes.
Still?
Well in advance of this 2 years coming up.
Okay.
So we'll know where we stand.
Got it. Okay. Anything else?
Couple of questions that go back a little bit. When you came to the significant amount and you put that at 15%, where did you come up with that number?
We just did a lot of research and looked at other jurisdictions, and we found 15% is not the lowest figure, but we found that if you use 15%, that was being upheld and justified. The courts were justifying that.
And we're qualifying this as a significant amount, whereas 14% is not a significant amount, evidently.
And the answer to that is you just have to draw the line.
I guess exactly right.
And
Okay.
we're really doing two things. We're lowering it to 15%, and we're eliminating the possibility of the vertical display being excluded. Because right now, what we really have is a significant, more than 20%
Sure.
of a space. I mean, if you look at what's available for display, people are probably, I mean, when you look at the entire walls in a building, like the old Gumby building where that place is, that's a huge amount of display area
Wall
being
space.
utilized for adult entertainment material that's really not counted.
And that's based on our definition.
Yeah,
Is
it's
it
just, it was
sufficient?
sort of a hole in
The
our
way we
definition
currently define.
Right.
that wasn't counting it. And now we're saying, heck, you know, if
Oops.
you're, you know, to me, walls are significant and we should be counting that.
I have an odd question too, perhaps. Say in the case of the store on the S-turn, okay, which is in a little strip mall. Now, if somebody wanted to put a pop-up church where the Taekwondo place is, what would be the implications there?
Question.
They couldn't put the church
No,
there,
They could put the church.
but they'd have to live with what was
Correct.
already there.
Yes, because they were grandfathered.
Okay. That was the end of that question then. Thank you.
Sure.
Because, I mean, obviously, my guess is that we would have significant First Amendment issues if we were to allow any church in our community to start opening up branches.
To move
just
right next to
Right.
Exactly.
adult
But-
bookstores.
Okay.
Yeah, that might be an issue.
So, but the current location of each of the two adult entertainment businesses and the one potential adult entertainment business under the new, potentially new code, each of them is currently a
Would not be allowed.
non-conforming
Yes,
use, correct?
Yes, that's
Okay.
correct.
and I think aren't they, is that general commercial where they're located?
Probably.
And there's actually, the general commercial is the one district that prohibits it.
Sure.
We only have like one district that literally prohibits adult
Okay,
entertainment.
so they're just,
And so they would have been gone a long time ago had we attempted to
got it.
sunset them.
And my apologies, it's not a Taekwondo place, it's a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Big difference.
Either of which, I understand.
All right. Any other questions, comments?
I had a couple, but
Thoughts?
my computer's updating and
Okay.
I've asked the ones I could remember, so I may have more later.
You know, my sense is that if you believe that we've got the right tools here, and that this will achieve what we've said we want to achieve, then, you know, I'm in favor of it. And I would recommend that council advance it to legislative session. Yeah, and we can bring in other questions or comments.
Yeah, I can send my questions.
Okay.
Mr. President?
Yes.
Are you referring it to Planning Commission for public hearing?
We need to do that with the changes to Chapter 17, correct? But not, do we need to send the entire legislative package to Planning Commission?
Only the zoning package.
Change,
Ju-
just the zoning?
but
We'll probably be sending them the change in definition.
So that they can
just so
see it
they
all.
can see what's going on,
Okay.
but they don't have to.
The
read that
context.
portion.
And we're thinking about this, are we changing any requirements in signage for places like this?
Or street.
They're
Can we-
already, the signage is already restricted as part of an adult entertainment business.
One would not know so by looking at one of these
Well,
places.
except by skirting the adult entertainment definition, they also skirt those.
Frankly, we did not anticipate that anyone would come along and say, I am not an adult business, and want to put up a sign that says, I'm an adult business.
Right.
They
Clever,
kinda
isn't
slipped
it?
that one by us. Right,
Right.
exactly.
Now, I mean, I guess it's possible that we could look at that as some kind of false advertising if we wanted to, but I'm not sure.
I think when
Right.
we're looking at protection of speech and being upheld by the courts, we may want to stay out of the sign
Not pick
category.
that fight. Okay.
Because normally you want to, if you're going to regulate signage, you can regulate size, location, and all
Exactly,
that.
not
And numbers.
content.
But if we
Not
start
content.
regulating content, then we're
Right.
stepping over.
Okay.
What about what is displayed outwardly in the windows?
As part of
Some
being.
of those are
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
If you're an
pretty
adult,
explicit.
if you're an adult entertainment business, you're currently not allowed to do that. So the only one that seems to openly do that is the one that claims
The one that
That they're
smells.
not adult entertainment.
I don't know, when you drive down
I tell you
13,
what.
look up next time. That's all
I mean,
I'll
the
say, 'cause-
real adult
There's some
entertainment
genius in this
businesses
business model,
actually
isn't there?
don't show any
Right,
depictions
Right.
outside their businesses.
okay. So,
We'll talk.
then, can council, what I'd like to do is get consensus for council to refer, the proposed changes, to the planning commission, for their recommendation, and they have to do a public hearing, correct?
Yes, they do.
Okay, for their recommendation and to
Yes,
conduct a
I
public
would
hearing.
anticipate that if the consensus is to proceed unless Mark had a conflict, we're going to try for this month. We can get the notice in this
Okay.
week. I know the mayor would like to proceed quickly.
Is there a consensus?
Yes.
Mr. Eads?
So right now, it's showing on Monday's planning agenda, it would go planning commission first, and then back to council.
Yes,
So we need to push it out then. Okay,
yes.
thank you.
And we'll be on for the third Thursday of this month, because we'll get the ad in the paper this week.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
And those businesses will be notified specifically, the ones that are affected.
Once it's adopted, I think we should.
Well, I mean, about the public hearing,
If you'd like me to.
what is the process for that?
A text change would not normally involve a notice to property owners, but you may want to hear about this sooner rather than later, so if you like, we can get the notice out.
I mean, we're gonna have to hold a public,
Yes.
a public hearing as well for Zoom.
Yes.
I'd rather notify them about the city council's public hearing so they can come here and talk to us.
Okay.
Right, that's why I wanted to know what.
Which public hearing?
Directly notify them, we will directly notify them about the city council's public hearing, but not, I mean, the planning commission, you can do what you wanna do
I'll
with your
take your
department.
direction, well, Mr. Spees, I'll take your direction if you have a preference.
Matters not to me.
Either
so-
or
Fine.
both. I think in fairness to the people who may be the respondents, I think both.
Okay.
You know, they should be notified.
That's
And there are
fine.
so few businesses that
We
it's
can
gonna
find-
cost us all
we can
$2
find-
in postage, okay?
That's fine.
If it goes to the planning commission on
there then.
3/26, first availability for city council would be April 13th, just to kind of give you some dates on when we would want to do notice, so. Thank you.
Good.
Thank
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
Thank you.
Okay.
Really? It says I'm connected, but I can't get it.
Next item on our agenda is council discussion on noise and construction and the definition of the weekday. Mr. Holland, welcome.
Thank you. Recently, the city's been receiving some complaints from some residential neighborhoods of particularly one new construction project that's going up on South Division Street. It's a student housing project. And unfortunately, this project under construction, I mean, backs straight up and borders an existing residential neighborhood, and they, you know, they were working on Saturdays, probably pretty early, like 7 o'clock, and again, we received numerous complaints about it, and what we were having trouble with was the definition of a weekday. And, you know, most people think, a weekday is Monday through Friday, but over the past years with the other legal department, Mr. Wilbur's office, I had the same issue, and both him and Mr. Tillman advised me the definition of weekdays, Monday through Saturday. And what this is opportunity for the city council to discuss if they want to actually define a weekday. And, you know, if it is to include Saturday, that may be limiting the available time that the construction men / women are out there working. Maybe instead of 7 o'clock, maybe 9 o'clock.
Yeah.
You know, that's pretty much.
So I have a question for you. Although the definition of weekday is in question, but we do have an opinion on, a legal opinion on this. Let's say I have a bank and, you know, I have some work that needs to be done. Can I have contractors work on Sunday in the city of Salisbury right now? Today?
What this law, what this ordinance is about is noise and not about working. So if you work quietly, I wouldn't see a problem. wouldn't see an issue with that.
And does that happen today?
I'm sure it probably does, especially in districts that may not border residential areas, maybe like up north in the center of Salisbury when they change out tenants, or I'm sure up there, Addison Court, which has just recently been completed, I'm sure they were going 7 days a week.
So we don't currently regulate, control, or limit the day of the week per se. It's noise and hours that we're
That's
focused on, correct? Okay. That makes a lot more sense to me, because I would think,
It's just a presumption that construction on days when it's not appropriate, by definition, meets the noise definition. I mean, the noise ordinance.
Right.
That's really the way it is. I mean, it doesn't prohibit work, but it means that if you are doing work on those days and it is creating noise, the law presumes that that noise is in violation of the noise ordinance.
But nor have we really quantified what the noise is.
Yeah.
No, we haven't.
We have
No.
reasonable.
And I'm guessing that when someone's working in your house or doing work and they're not disturbing the neighbors, it's never been a problem.
Yep.
But if they're outside using,
Set up concrete and putting on roofs.
yeah, if they're gonna break up a concrete sidewalk on Sunday morning, you're gonna get some calls.
Or a nail gun, or whatever it is.
so I think the things that we need to discuss are not so much defining weekday as defining what reasonable is with regard to noise. We need to discuss appropriate hours. We've got hours of 7 a.m. to 6 p.m., which I think should apply to every day, not weekdays, or not exclusively weekdays. And then, unless there's an interpretation of this that says Sundays you're operating outside of the context of the law by connecting the hours to weekdays. And then I think we need to have some discussion about zoning and whether or not there would be any limitations, like adjacency to, R5, adjacency to residential. If there's an immediate adjacency, would there be tighter hours, on weekends, something like that. And I only bring that up as a topic of discussion, not as a recommendation.
I would even go as far as to say not even adjacent to, but within a specified distance of.
Okay.
Yeah,
So-
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
My understanding of this is because we don't specifically define what a weekday is, that's why Saturday has been included as a weekday. Not because it's not what most of us think of as a weekend
Well-
versus a weekday, but because we didn't define it. The explanation I got was because we don't clearly define it as Monday through Friday, then we have to use, and it's a criminal statute, or a piece of it is, that we have to define it as loosely as possible, and therefore they have included Saturday. But if we say it's Monday through Friday, then it's Monday through Friday, correct?
But
Yeah.
again, what would that matter if we currently allow construction on non-weekdays as well? We allow construction on Sundays.
Only by default, that's what I'm saying. We don't specifically allow it.
Okay. Well, then we need to explicitly allow construction on Saturdays and Sundays. I mean, that's what I just heard crystal clear is there is and needs to be construction on Saturdays and Sundays. And that's been my understanding all along. So the question, again, is really not so much about the weekday or not the weekday, unless we're going to change the what can happen on a Friday from a Saturday. If 6 a.m. is the Friday time and 8 a.m. is the Saturday time.
Okay, I follow what you're saying. I just want to make sure we were clear about
I mean,
why we were changing what part we were changing.
it does make sense that if you had, a bridge collapse somewhere, that you would want people working to reconstruct that 24/7.
Well,
So
there is
I don't-
emergency.
There is,
provision
there is
in
a
there.
thing in there about safety and
I think-
public safety.
I
And
think the question is less about emergency and more about
Yeah.
prudence, It's impossible to expect, there not to be construction, particularly for a business like a bank that has specific hours, for them not to do construction work off hours, in evenings or weekends. But we have to be careful about what we allow and when and how it disturbs or doesn't disturb neighbors.
Right. The times have also been brought up quite a bit because, if it says you stop at 6, then they're working till 6:30 and then spending an hour cleaning up, that's still making noise. So it's not just the construction, but the activity on the site.
Yeah.
So, they could say, well, we're mixing concrete, we're not actually doing construction.
Right. So that's why
still pretty loud.
noise is a better measure.
Right.
Yeah, noise has to be in my opinion, noise has to be the guideline for the whole thing. We do have, when you start really thinking about it, if someone's gonna do 7-day construction in the middle of Northwood Industrial Park,
Who cares?
Who cares? Right.
I mean, it doesn't make a difference. And from an economical and from a growth point of view, you don't want to discourage building.
Right.
Or renovating. So taking that into consideration, I think that noise is the way to go. However, I also think that, to Tim's point, within a certain distance of residences, there has to be consideration given. And I would even say, and I don't know if we want to call it out specifically, but on Saturday, I think it's reasonable to say maybe 8 o'clock is a better start. If you're working 5 days a week, and that's your day, your 2 days off, and you want to sleep in, and 6 o'clock in the morning, a backup on a tractor
Yep.
is out your bedroom window, that's an issue. And we have to be, and I totally understand that. But I think that we have to work it out so that there's a win-win for both individuals. This is one of those negotiation things that we have to take both parties in consideration. And I'm not sure the best way to, reasonableness has to come into it for sure.
Yeah, I agree. I think, so if we were to do something like, and this is only part of a proposal, but just typing this out, if you take 5 things that we're weighing in on here, the day of the week, the hours of the day, the noise that we're measuring and what we define as reasonable, the geography, and the tools for enforcement, which we haven't really discussed yet. But Monday through Friday, we can differentiate from Saturday and Sunday, and I don't know, I haven't heard Saturday versus Sunday being differentiated any differently. Hours, it's currently 7 to 6. We could say Monday through Friday, 7 to 6, Saturday and Sunday, 8 to 6, 8 to 5. I don't know. And then noise, how do we, my only understanding of defining, of enforcing the noise ordinance in residential areas for parties, things like that, is distance, how far away you can hear it. Is that really the only realistic measure?
It is.
Measuring stick we
because
have?
The OSHA definition is time-weighted averages, which is ridiculous. That's very difficult to do, and it may not apply to.
A lot of jurisdictions use decibel readings
They do?
from a distance, from a specified distance. And the chief had done some work on this about two and a half years ago.
Yes.
We were talking about the noise ordinance. It never came to us, so I don't know what happened with that, but they were looking at other jurisdictions and what they do, because our noise ordinance is very vague and makes it very hard to enforce. And if we're gonna tie the enforcement of this to something that's already pretty much unenforceable, then we're not doing anything. We might as well stop talking. The enforcement is another issue, in addition to how do you determine whether they are in violation based on the noise level. We're talking about contractors that have deadlines and bonuses associated with when they finish or if they don't finish on time. It's gonna have to be a pretty painful penalty for it to mean anything to them, or it's gonna be just as cheap for them to, or reasonable, I guess, from a financial perspective, to pay the fine and keep working than to pay the penalty for finishing late.
Well, I think you're right about that, and that's what I meant as far as enforcement, because, it shouldn't be okay for someone to say, yeah, I'll take the fines and keep doing it.
Right.
Then
And we're tying up resources.
What's the point of the
sending them
law?
back out there and,
what's the
right.
point?
Well, if you have an active construction site, you likely have a building permit. Just through the building permit, you could always place a stop work.
suspend the building permit. That's what I was curious about.
Mr. Holland, any thoughts on that?
I mean, you have to tie it into what you're doing here, but
So that would probably get someone's attention.
Well, I mean, it's the equivalent.
You
of
gotta
taking
come to
away
us
a
more
medical
often,
license.
so.
that's the way to do it.
If you're
You
dropping
stop them
that
doing what they're
dry
doing
sense
to
of
make
humor on
money.
us, you gotta come hang out more often. Okay, that's,
I can tell you, this project's way behind schedule due to the weather and the
Weather,
rain.
yeah.
And, I go by there at nights, go to run errands or something, it's dark, man, they're still up there on the roof, hanging by ropes.
And Sunday
Correct.
morning, we turn the clocks forward, that's gonna be another hour
And,
of daylight.
yeah, in the evenings during the weekday. I don't see them stopping work at 6 o'clock in the evening, because they're not now.
Okay.
I mean, that's how far behind they are on this project. Can't help the weather.
No, but if you're gonna take a contract where you're planning on working through the winter, you pretty much ought to build that in.
Well, you would think, yeah.
You can't,
Maybe not this much, but
This is
Mother Nature's been pretty upset lately.
yeah, this is a bad year, without a doubt. Okay.
I think
don't
we
have-
probably need to talk about the noise ordinance before we can really do a lot with this.
I've been thinking the same thing, and it's, we need to qualify and quantify if we're gonna do that. I mean, but
How much noise is too much?
how much is enough? How much is too,
Well,
yeah,
What's
yeah.
Just-
acceptable, how close, and
A thought here.
Loud music coming from somebody's house.
We're gonna have some serious issues with Chesapeake Shipbuilding and the residential project next door. And we need to think about that as well. Every time I ride by there, I think to myself, I'm not sure I'd want to hear that steel work going on that close to my house. But, I mean, both are very important, and
would they
we
be
need to
grandfathered? But that's not an active construction site either, that's a
manufacture.
manufacturing business that has a business license to do that, and they're there, and people are moving in, and they know
well,
they're there.
yeah, that's like somebody complaining about the noise from the airplanes when you moved and you
Right.
bought your house after the airport's there.
Right.
Right,
I mean,
well, it's
there's-
like in
there's a-
Delaware, if you
I'm-
buy in
I'm
rural
just-
county, you have to sign a stack of paperwork
Right.
like this, that you know you're living near a farm, you're gonna have noises and smells and the odd hours, and you can't complain.
Or the barge is bumping in the middle of the night.
I'm only predicting that we'll get calls.
I would imagine, but this specifically pertains to construction, correct?
This provision does,
Yes.
yes.
But you're right, with the noise
Well,
ordinance,
that's what makes me
but what are
think.
their hours there?
Yeah, that's what makes me think that whatever we define, it should be associated with 8.20.020. It should be associated specifically with construction activities, so that we don't get into the other tier. Now, there should be parallel, I think, between the definition of how much noise is too much noise here and other parts of the code. But I think specifically, I think this is one of those areas where we might want to back into the noise ordinance.
I think we have to, because we're not doing anything just by changing this and saying that, if the noise is unreasonable, define that.
No, we
That's
ha-
no clear,
yeah, we
more
have to
clear than
define that.
weekday.
The other thing I'd like to know is, do our police officers have any means of measuring decibels right now?
Not yet,
They do not.
Okay.
that would be,
It's subjective.
That would not be a,
But it is, it's considered to be at a volume which is disruptive to the peace and serenity of the home, the property.
according to whom?
yeah,
Yeah. That's what it's held at, though, And I'd like to know the last time we gave a citation to somebody who had a really loud car stereo. That would be never.
I can, refer you to several places where they could rack up a stack.
And do they uphold it?
Yeah.
Come sit in my driveway.
Yeah, that's another
Somebody pulled
question.
up here in the intersection with their windows up, and I could hear it.
So,
When your house shakes.
I mean, it's my sense that what we want to do is, both through the noise ordinance and through Section 8, pertaining to construction of buildings, We want to differentiate between Monday through Friday and Saturday and Sunday. We want to, as weekday and weekend, we want to associate some specific set of hours to each. We can use the 7 to 6 that we have on Monday through Friday, and we can expand that. We can go 6 to 6 or whatever. And then we want to limit Saturday and Sunday. We want to define reasonable in the noise ordinance, and we want to update the enforcement piece to either at first violation or second violation, put a stop work order until there's compliance. My recommendation would be that we have Mr. Tillman draft those two, or one ordinance that updates those two sections of the code. And then we can
I think
continue to debate the content,
I think Chief Duncan's probably gonna have to work on the noise ordinance part of it.
particularly if
Or the
if
police
we're gonna
department.
define it through decibels.
Right, and we have to look at what the cost of the decibel readers are and how
Yep.
many we need and,
Yep.
you know, I mean, the K-9, we don't have a lot of those, they come as they're needed, so we probably only need one or two. But I don't remember what they cost, I think they were somewhere around $1,000. There may be some camera money that's available for that, I don't know. But the trickier part will be agreeing on how much is too much and setting that. What bothers me about this route, and it's difficult because I don't know another way, but we are offering no relief to the people that are suffering this right now. We're not giving them anything,
Well,
and it's unfortunate.
we
but
could
I
do
don't
this
know.
and define reasonable in a different way. We could move much more quickly if we didn't base it on decibels. I think decibels is the most objective approach, but we could define it using the same tool that we have today, which is distance.
I think that we could probably move forward with that part and just reference, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Tillman, in this part of it, reference the noise ordinance, if you're in violation of the noise ordinance. That way, when we get that part correct, for now, we'd be using the way it stands. When we fix that part to be decibels or wherever else we end up, we won't have to go back to this. It will just refer to that.
I mean,
So,
what we came here today on, or what was presented, was really just a presumption. I mean, that's all it was, so that the city could actually prove a noise case without it becoming, a circus, because I think a lot of times noise cases turn into that.
Right.
But the other issue I have, even if you go with the decibels, isn't there gonna be a different level acceptable at 2 AM than at 2 PM?
well, but this is.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
that's not hard to lay out.
Can we, because I haven't looked into that yet. I'd have
This
to
is
go-
not making any definition about what happens within the hours
Okay.
of what reasonable is. This is only beyond the hours. Yeah, that's the only thing that we're trying to define today.
I'm going to argue against myself.
I'm doing the same thing.
Go right ahead.
Which is not uncommon, but if we talk about the hours, I'll give you the flip side of the hours. I'm a drywaller. The frame's up, they're not, the drywall's all inside. All I'm doing is drywalling. Why can't I start at 7 on Saturday?
But then you could, because you wouldn't be in violation of the volume, the noise level would be, because
So
it's
long
contained
as-
inside.
You absolutely could.
I would
So
expect.
this wouldn't restrict activity.
Fine.
This would only restrict
Noise.
the externality that, you're creating for your neighbors.
Okay. And to be honest, I got involved with the thing because he's right down the street from me. One of the biggest complaints was the fact that they started before,
Even
they were
before
doing the
6.
back before 6. I
Yeah.
mean, that's.
Oh, yeah.
And the construction guy totally admits it and says it was wrong. And he admits that they shouldn't have done it, and
Are they still doing it?
no,
Okay.
Okay.
no. But his complaint, I mean, it's like everything else. You do it at 5:45 or whatever it is in the morning once, and then everything's super intensified and you get emotional and I understand it, because I was there when they were backing up that piece of equipment, and
it's loud.
Well, there's another way that we can define the times,
Unless it has a beeper going when it's in reverse.
right?
You couldn't hear the beeper because it was so loud.
So I think what we, but to your point, Jack, what's defined today is there is activity defined, or a limitation to activity. So we could do one of two things. We could only define the externality, only define noise, or we could define both by saying, here's the acceptable noise level prior to these hours, but you can't even be on site, we could say
Past 10
within
p.m.
1 hour, before or after,
Right.
or something like that. So even if you arrive and start talking and really loud, even if it's not loud enough to reach that threshold, you can't even be on site until, 1 hour before, 1 hour after, something like that. And I like your idea of referencing the noise ordinance and then dealing with that separately.
Right, that way we can move with this.
There's a mechanism for enforcement
Right.
today.
'Cause there's at least something there, it's not great, but there's at least something, and then we can work on that separately.
I think that'll give us a framework that we can move on.
Good start.
All right, so,
There's one more option in terms of time, I don't know how you feel about this, but, for instance, with a lot of the hunting laws, they don't give specific times, they frame it in terms of dusk and dawn. So a person would have to look at what time's sunrise, what time's sunset. I don't know how if that really matters, if it's dark at 5 o'clock and you're working inside till 8, does it matter? Or do we want to stick with specific times? So, the reason I brought that up was because in the hours where the days are shorter, that's usually when kids are in school,
Yeah.
the majority of them, so they're going to bed earlier and they're, people are settling in and trying to calm their worlds
I wish,
at an earlier hour.
I wish the, neighborhood representative had showed up. That would have been useful to hear their perspective on that. I don't have a strong opinion.
It was just something that popped into my head.
I mean,
I don't either.
I think hours are reasonable, and that's what we use in the code right now, but I think what you're talking about is also reasonable, so. I don't know.
Probably cleaner to go with hours.
Hours.
Easier for the police to interpret.
And it's also easier to schedule your guys.
That's a good point. That's a good point. Okay, stick with hours.
Are you proposing then that you would go with a decibel reading?
Not at this point in
Not at this
time.
point.
So at this point in
Because,
time, we
I
would,
think it already says that if it impacts the peace of the resident, and that's enough to trigger it right there. You got the call, you were working outside of the allowable work hours. You're in violation. The only problem is that the violation here is a misdemeanor. You're probably not gonna do that. If you look at 820.130, you would wanna change that to a municipal infraction so you could write a citation.
Well, it's possible that the reason it's a misdemeanor is because of the enforcement challenge. Because people don't want to be arrested for it. They'll pay the fines, but they don't want to be arrested
Right.
for it.
well, that might not be the right approach, though, either. I mean, a municipal citation can also be linked to a stop work order. So we could cite at first offense and provide and stop work on second offense, something like that.
I'd rather do it that way and keep it in-house than use the state ordinance to
Right.
really spank somebody.
Yeah, I would too. I was just thinking why, because
Arresting
I didn't
someone
understand before.
seems a
why
little
it was
severe. Okay, so,
criminal offense anyway.
so, we're gonna do this in two strokes. The first is going to be, in chapter 8, defining and differentiating weekday and weekend hours, the on-site definition, so 1 hour before, 1 hour after, and the enforcement piece.
How about 30 minutes before and after? Is that enough?
I don't know, I'd rather,
I think certainly before, after I'm not so worried about cleanup and stuff like that, but if we're setting the hours starting at 6 a.m., that means at 5:30, they can be out there moving stuff around and clang banging and
we said 7 a.m. on weekdays and 8 a.m. on.
7 to 6. I keep reversing that. 6 to 7.
So I mean.
What was that again, 7 what?
7 to 6 and 8 to 6. 7 to 6 on weekdays, 8 to 6 on weekends.
Or Monday through Friday and then Saturday.
And yeah, and
Yes,
that's how we,
yes,
and that's how we
please,
need to
thank you.
write it. Never would have thought that we would have to, but,
Yeah, yeah.
all right, so recommendation then is that we make those changes through Mr. Tillman's office. If you and Mr. Holland can work together to draft an ordinance for council's consideration, we'll get that on the next possible work session.
So all we're really proposing at this time is the time distinction that we're gonna make, and
The day
we're gonna
distinction.
actually define what a weekend consists of.
Yes.
Right, Monday through Friday will be these times, Saturday and Sunday are these times, but also the
Enforcement.
provision about the enforcement for being able to suspend this building permit.
We want a
Issue
municipal
stop work.
citation or municipal infraction. And
Now,
then,
you don't want to eliminate the possibility of a criminal infraction for a noise violation, do you?
no, not in general, but specific to this, I think we definitely want to be able to do the municipal
So we're
citation
linking civil citation with permits.
and then permit as a second offense. As enforcement
I
tool for
wouldn't
the
really
second offense.
recommend that you eliminate the criminal aspect of it, because you're gonna have some people that, as you say, would be more than happy to write you a check to
Whatever,
pay the
here,
fine,
go away.
just to irritate the
Right, but then that doesn't account for
Yeah.
how, the police officers have to go
The,
out there.
the
and-
eviction
or you
party
have
or
to-
something like that,
Right.
where somebody's willing to.
Now, I can't remember from reading this, does it already reference the noise ordinance? Because that was the other thing we wanted to do, right?
Yeah, but I'm not sure we need to do that with the same sense of urgency.
Well, I thought the goal was to not have to go back and touch this piece again. We would reference that as the threshold.
Right, that's what I'm saying, I'm not
outside
sure
of
we
those
need to.
hours, and it would, whatever that definition is now and whatever it becomes.
So
would
what are
be
you,
controlling.
what are you saying then, that you,
That in
your
here,
question?
we would, in terms of determining what is a violation, being on site before those hours, well, is it just being on site before those hours, or is it?
no, that's the
No.
1 hour before and after, that,
Because what they generally do is, the first thing they do is the boss, the supervisor, will get the leads together and discuss what's gonna happen during the
Right.
day. And generally, that takes 25 to 40 minutes.
So,
so let me just talk it out. Between 7 AM and 6 PM from Monday to Friday, none of this applies.
right,
From 6 PM to 7 AM the next day, the noise, however we define that through the noise ordinance, is going to determine whether or not you are cited. You know,
right,
the-
because
the amount
allowing
of
the
noise.
work inside, so we do need to reference the noise ordinance, because if they're working inside, outside of those hours, but they're working inside not creating noise, that's okay. If they're
That-
working inside
exactly,
and
this-
creating a lot of
it's
noise,
only noise.
we need a measurement for that.
It's only noise. Well, but what we were also doing was saying that 1 hour on either side of that, so to 7 PM on weekdays and to 6
Can't even be on
AM
site. Okay.
on Mondays, you can't even be on the site between, 7
Yeah, I
PM
guess that takes care of it then.
and 6 AM. And that's what it says here. I mean, no construction activity whatsoever in our code currently.
Right, right.
You can't do anything. You can't be on site. You can't do any of that work.
Well, then that'll take care of it.
Yeah.
Make sense?
Mhm.
Council consensus on moving this forward?
Yep.
Mr. Holland, is
Absolutely.
that clear? And I can email you what I just typed real quick. Okay,
Please.
all right. I will.
Bill, are you comfortable with that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
We don't do, one more question, we don't do anything between their working hours if it's extraordinarily loud. We don't have any, whatever they do between those hours is okay, correct?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, there are no restrictions on how much noise you could make.
Gotta do what you gotta
It just
do.
During
is
those
what it
hours.
is. Right, okay. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Bill.
So I'll send you both, just those quick notes that I just typed out. And, if you have any questions, just let us know. All right? Thank you.
Bill.
Thank you, Bill. All right. Next item on our agenda is proposed charter changes. Mr. Stevenson, Articles 3, 4, and 5.
Yes, thank you. Fortunately, there are only a few when the council last discussed these issues, we covered Article 1 and 2. Today, I'm going to move us through 3, 4, and 5 quickly. In the, beyond the memo, the first page, Article 3, the mayor, and I'll try to number these pages going forward, SC 3-1 term, there's a reference there that was made by city clerk. That issue's actually been resolved since we changed the elections to 2015, so you can disregard that. And I think we're going to find we may see that again. So that one's done and out of the way. At the bottom of that same page, a couple of places here, SC 3-4 powers, A ordinances, and under SC 3-4D vetoes. We talked about this the last time, and this is the memorandum that was provided by the previous city solicitor, Mr. Wilbur, where they got into this whole discussion about whether or not the mayor had veto power for ordinances, resolutions, which ones were they going to be administrative or legislative in nature. So that's really sort of just a continuation of what we discussed the last time. So when Mr. Tillman and I sit down and try to pull all of these things together, this is just simply another area that we'll try to clean up and make sure it's consistent. If I could take you to Article 4, it shows up on the bottom of the next page, City Administrator. Go through to a couple of places here. Getting to the very end, the very last piece of Article 4 is SC 4-5 duties of the city administrator. Mr. Pick, when he was here, and as you know, this started back then, this review, Mr. Pick recommended that we add section SC 4-6, Assistant City Administrator, and it reads, the Assistant City Administrator shall be authorized, the City Administrator shall be authorized to appoint an Assistant City Administrator subject to the confirmation of the mayor. His compensation shall be determined by the City Council. The Assistant City Administrator shall perform such duties as the City Administrator shall require and shall act as the City Administrator in the City Administrator's absence. So we would propose adding SC 4-6. Any discussion on that particular piece? No?
None.
Thank you. Moving further down, just wanted to point out at the bottom of that same page under Article 5, SC 5-1 enumerations, number 6, during the council's February 23rd meeting, we did read in to the record a resolution changing that from 3 years to 20 years. Council approved that. We're at the 50-day review period at this point for that charter change.
Can I interject right there?
Yes, ma'am.
In 5-3, the fifth line down, that's the first place that I see this, but there seems to be a lot of references in here that caused some confusion about when we were discussing the whole veto issue, where it references ordinances or bylaws, which seem to be what we now call resolutions, but in our charter, it still refers to them as bylaws, and it creates a lot of confusion, and I think that we should change any instances of bylaws to resolution if that's what we mean.
Ms. Nichols and I talked about that before coming in here today, so that'll be part of the ongoing review process. When we get through the charter, we'll identify all those places that reference bylaws.
Or we
and try
need to
get
do
that
a
cleaned up.
find, replace.
Yeah.
5-3, fifth line down. About midway across,
Yeah.
it says bylaws, and there's a couple references in there, but if we're making these corrections now, wouldn't that be a fairly simple?
Yeah, that's just a word search, and we'll go through and identify those places and
Okay.
change them. But thank you for pointing that out.
Through the entirety of the charter, correct?
Right.
Yes.
It's really only in this portion right here.
The use of that bylaws language is just when they initially did the standard charters and stuff, they would use that bylaw language, and it really is antiquated. I think.
Right, right, and now we call them resolutions, but when it comes down to looking at whether or not, for instance, the mayor can veto something, if you're talking about a resolution, there's no power in here for it, but, because they can reference bylaws, and then there's the argument, is that the same thing?
Okay, thank you. So we'll move on. I'll take you to the very last page of what was submitted for today's review. Again, Articles 3, 4, and 5. At the top of the page there, you'll see that Mr. Pick noted that in some areas within the code, it says, in these sections, we are authorized to own water systems and to franchise sewer systems, but we are not authorized to own sewer systems. He recommended that we changed the language to say that we're authorized to own sewer systems. And if you look back at, and again, we're still under the enumeration piece, if you look at number 28, if you're with me there, number 28, it reads, public utilities to establish, own, control, operate, and maintain and manage, and then it says public market, a public market and plant or plants and systems or systems for supplying water. We would just simply recommend that we add sewer here as well.
Any reason that was written that way?
No clue.
Mr. Tillman, any thoughts on that?
No, I really can't. I mean, I guess we sort of measure most people by water, and maybe at the time this was written, that was the only way we measured, how much we were going to charge. And they may have just included sewer as a necessary part of that, water and sewer.
Okay.
But, no, I think that's just an old reference that can be clarified.
Okay.
So we'll include sewer then. And then on number 31, this is really a question from Mr. Tillman. It says sewers, to grant franchises and regulate the putting of sewers or drains on or under its public ways and the charges for entering same. If we are going to own and operate our own sewer system, would we strike number 31? Or I suppose at some point, something different could
Yeah,
come
I don't
along.
think you want to eliminate
Just
the
leave it.
ability
Okay.
to do that in the future.
Okay.
I mean, one of the nice things is you want to have as broad a power, you as a council would like to have your powers as broad as possible.
Okay.
And although, virtually all systems would be connected to our sewer system, there may be cases where there's a pre-treatment plant or, other mechanisms, some of which we have in the city currently, but you never know.
Okay. I just didn't
We
know if it
we
was-
wouldn't want there to be, and I don't think MDE would allow there to be other systems that feed into ours, but,
Well, we have-
pre-treatment or
There
industrial.
are some private sewer systems that exist in the county.
There are
So
currently,
if
yes.
we were to
But-
annex
Yeah.
those.
But whether or not
systems-
MDE would let those continue to
I don't know.
exist, I think is in question.
Okay, I don't disagree, I
Fair
just
point.
wanted to ask, and I would say that if we're going to continue to regulate the speed of horses, as was articulated here, then no, we would consider keeping this in as well.
Well, there are horse rides in the park.
No, we don't
Just
want
saying.
anybody to get out of control here,
Just
so
saying.
we'll leave that in.
And at Christmas downtown.
Also on the next page, number 38, this was not highlighted as something that was to be discussed, but in 38 lowercase a, Mr. Tillman, it says, "The council shall have the power pursuant to Article 23A, subsection 3." It's no longer referenced as 23A, and if you'll help me, it's now,
I'm not certain, I'm gonna have to.
but it's not 23A anymore.
Yeah, I think it's all part of the local government article.
Local government article, that's it.
Okay, I thought you wanted me to give you the exact number.
So it's,
I knew you could if I asked.
you're just talking, Mr. Stevenson, about updating the Maryland article that's being referenced.
And I
That's
think
it.
we would do that same word search because it appears a few lines later, this same reference to 23A, and it needs to say local government act.
Okay.
So we'll do that. I just happen to be rereading it in preparation for today's discussion.
Should we put something in there that, because every time they want to make a change to it, they rename it. Should we put something in there that says, or
Or whatever it is at the time.
whatever they call it this week?
Right.
Or subsequent nomenclature.
Right, right. I don't
Probably
have
not a
words
bad
for
idea.
what to
I would
talk about, but-
defer to Mr. Tillman in terms of how to craft that language. So when we pull all of this together, we can do that. Thank you.
There's some standard language for that.
And then the next item on the last page, and Ms. Nichols and I went through number 14, franchises, this apparent typo on line 8. This came from the former city clerk. It says fight should be replaced with right. We looked and looked and looked and couldn't find it, so we can only assume that at some point it got corrected. So we can disregard that. And then under SC 5-3, enforcement, and this is the last item for me. This is just a general reference from Ms. Colgrove saying that there should be consistency, and we're attempting to accomplish that now. So that concludes the review and recommendations for Article 3, 4, and 5, unless council picked up on anything during your review that we need to take care of as well.
Any council opposition to anything discussed?
No.
City jail, we don't have one of those anymore. but,
No, I read through that, but we do have a holding
Holding
cell
facility.
or
Yeah.
two at the police department headquarters. So I
Yeah.
suppose we just leave it in.
Close enough.
Okay. And I read some other, I got some other interesting terms as I was reading through that this weekend.
40 houses.
That one, yes,
I
I
saw
looked,
that, I
yeah.
picked that up.
What was that one?
Bawdy House?
Bawdy House. I have not a clue, but
What
I
a body
think I
house
know.
is? Oh,
So.
yeah.
You're right. And that's all I have, and we'll try to get through the next 2 or 3 articles within the next few meetings. Thank you for your time and consideration today.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. All right, next item on our agenda is to adopt a revised departmental directive on over-occupancy of rental properties, and then we have the subsequent ordinance. So I'll invite Ms. Phillips to come forward. How are you? Good afternoon.
Susan, would you ask Mr. Tillman to join you at the head of
Yes.
the table, please?
Thank you, Mr. Tillman.
Certainly.
Got an updated copy of the directives. As I was going through that, I saw that there was a slightly different version in your packet.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So what you just shared is the resolution adopting the directive that you were discussing today.
It
Is
is.
that correct?
Yes, and
Thank you.
attached, you will see the policy directive
Thank you.
that we'll be discussing.
Is what's in bold in here, what's different from what was in the packet?
No.
Ms. Phillips, when you get to
You
that
want-
point, can you point out the
Yeah.
revisions, please, for the?
Yeah, when we get
meetings of the
there.
Council?
Yes.
Thank you.
Number 1, basically, under the second paragraph, number 1 is different.
Okay.
And
Can you give us 1 second? I'll just look through
Yes.
that. Okay.
And this will be the departmental directive to ensure the proper procedure of enforcing this code section within the department. And as it says, the policy's the purpose of this policy is to link any violation of the occupancy provisions as referenced in the property maintenance code to the housing official's authority to deny, revoke, suspend, or not renew the landlord's rental unit license, rental unit registration as required in Chapter 1526, and when appropriate, to reduce the maximum allowed occupancy of a non-conforming use. This policy will ensure proper execution of the occupancy provisions set forth in this code by the housing official and all enforcement staff. Number 1 says, if an occupancy violation is identified, a citation for a municipal infraction is issued. So that would be the first step, a citation would be issued. So once we identify a property is overoccupied either by complaint or routine patrol, a citation is issued. If it is obvious by way of evidence that the landlord is aware, has prior knowledge of the overoccupancy, we would skip to number 3 and 4. And if we have evidence that the landlord was not aware, we would follow procedures 2 through 4. And I can go through those. 2 through 4 is identification, issuing the letter of identification of excessive occupancy, and that's providing them the 10 days. You have a question?
Yeah, I do. It says if you have a preponderance of evidence that the property owner knew, you skip to 3 and through 4. But the first thing 3 says is references back to 2, immediately following the 10-day time period.
You skip
3A.
It's
Oh,
not 3.
okay, just 3A, not.
3A is
okay.
where it begins, and this was really, this change in the policy followed my conversation, I think, with the council president, Mr. Renier, where he was expressing concern, why should the innocent landlord face that punitive measure? So this was an
That's what he's
attempt
been
to
telling
make that
us all
distinction.
along.
This was an attempt to distinguish, for example, if someone has been out there advertising for a sixth person in his house, it seems like you should apply the punitive measures immediately.
Right away.
But if there's no evidence that he knew, if the lease was for the appropriate number of people, but yet there's an over-occupancy, we're gonna give him the benefit of the doubt, basically.
Right.
Well, and they're
Short
still
of
gonna be,
inspecting every property every day, how do you know?
they're still gonna be required to reduce, and they're still gonna be cited.
They'll get its citation, but they're not gonna lose immediately, as long as they take the action that's
Right.
required under the policy and take, for example, we would expect them to issue an eviction notice to that individual.
I think that's the only standard that we can use in terms of whether or not they're taking the appropriate action. They have to start eviction, I think. So otherwise, we don't know that they've taken
This
any
wouldn't
action.
require, for example, that they file for eviction, but they would have to give that 30-day notice to that individual to get out.
Okay.
And then they would file in due course, but they would have to begin something.
But of the person that is not supposed to be, person or persons that are not supposed to be there, correct? Not, they don't have to evict everyone, all the tenants. in
They
order
don't have to,
satisfy that.
but they might choose to
I
if
think
they
a lot
want to
of them
blame
do.
their other tenants for violating a lease, for
Right,
example.
right, but that's not what we're looking for.
No,
No.
this is just the over.
Until you get to B. Right? I mean, because once someone has their
That's if they
their
know.
rental unit registration, yeah, right, when you get to 3B, if we're going to suspend their rental unit registration, that has to be immediate.
Correct.
Because if you say until the end of the lease, I mean, you could write a 10-year lease. You know, so that has to be immediate. There are two questions that I have that have come up for me over the last couple of days reading through what we've talked about so far, and this is a little bit different, but the two questions are this. Over what period of time are we determining whether or not there is a second offense? Within what period of time?
Yeah, we did have it at 12 months, didn't we? I don't know, it says when it's.
I feel that this should be, as far as perpetuity of ownership,
Isn't that on
Well,
87?
you know, if we go from, if you're gonna say, okay, you've had a first offense, and you got a
Okay.
3-month suspension of your rental unit registration at that property, and 6 months later, we determine it's happened again.
okay.
How likely is that, you know, I think, and certainly to get to a third offense, I think what I think we need to do is to define the time period as 24 or even longer.
Right.
You know, to say, you know, you're consistently doing this at this property over and over again. That's the only way we're ever gonna, I think, get to a second offense or third offense.
As written, I think Ms. Phillips is correct that it's now would be ownership. In
Okay.
other words, The way, it doesn't specify a
So as
specific
long as
period
you
of
own-
time.
okay.
So if you're the owner and this
Even
is
better.
your third offense, then this is what you
Got
would
it.
get.
And another
But
thing.
You could specify if you wanted to a period of time.
Another thing that I'd like us to figure out, to consider, and I think there's a way to do this just in the first offense, second offense, third offense, But another thing that I'd like us to consider is that a rental unit owner licensee, a landlord, essentially, who has multiple properties and has violations on multiple properties, I think we need to have some mechanism for saying, you know, you're getting away with it once at multiple properties on your license. We need to hold that person accountable somehow. I don't know how we do that, because I know people can, you know, create multiple LLCs.
Isn't, the registration is the property, the license is the individual, correct?
Yes.
I can never keep that
That's
straight.
right.
The license is the individual,
So
and the
you
license
license an
can be,
individual who can register multiple properties.
but that could be multiple LLCs, multiple
Could be.
businesses, right?
Could have-
So we could cross-reference those to say they're controlled by, or a member, you or an immediate member of your family owns or controls.
A stake in,
Yeah.
okay. Because
We'd have to add that,
I th-
obviously.
I think, you know, we run the risk of, you know, playing whack-a-mole more than we already do. Where we've got one property that gets hammered, and, you know, the activity simply shifts to another property. Or, worse yet, it shifts from neighborhood to neighborhood.
As written, this would affect rental unit registration, so it would be the unit.
The unit, right.
Yes.
And what I'm saying is, and I think that's fine, but I think it should also, at some point, you know, let's say a third or fourth cumulative offense over a license or linked licenses, you know, however you can do that, you know, I think we've got to hold the bad actor accountable, you know.
So you're looking for something that would basically identify the bad landlord, in other words, whoever he is.
Yeah.
Well,
And-
but
and
then-
zap, yeah.
Then you've got an LLC that has 5 people in it. And you've got,
That's not
One
gonna
of
be the
them doing
purpose of, that's
something-
not gonna be the purpose of creating LLCs for multiple houses. Those are typically one, you know, one owner.
right, but if you have an owner in common in 2 properties, and then they go in with somebody else who doesn't know that they've
So
been
how,
in this situation.
so how do
and
we,
then you-
how do we address that?
I would almost have to ask, where's the problem, to answer that question? In other words, is it an individual, is it a property that seems to be the problem? I mean, is it an individual owner who has multiple properties that are a problem? Or is it just the house on so-and-so street?
Well, I've been out of it for a little while, so I, to some extent, would defer to Susan, but I would say that sometimes you're seeing both. Occasionally, it is a particular property that seems to be repeatedly in violation, and then other times you're seeing property owners that tend to violate the code. I would circle back to 1526-110, by where it says that if a property owner is in violation of the code, then he or she could lose their license. So let's just say you were having multiple properties with the same problem tied to the same license. This would be an either-or opportunity. You could suspend the unit registration at that particular property, or if there was a pattern of noncompliance, then you could take 1526-110 and impact the license, because they would be out of compliance with the unit registration.
Okay, okay.
That would be the simplest
I think I understand.
way for me.
Would we want to quantify that specifically as how many offenses, or would you want to leave that more discretionary, where you've got someone who is a chronic violator?
Well, it simply says fails to comply.
And that's part of the licensing, right?
Yes.
Okay.
And by accomplishing what we set out to do, and I think we've lost sight of that, at the beginning, we were simply only trying to attach over occupancy to the possibility of having your unit registration or your license suspended or revoked. So if we can still get that piece in, which we've sort of lost sight of, then it's all still.
It's still
tied.
in there.
It's here, I realize that, but then it's all still tied together.
Okay, well, For the purposes of adding to the discussion, I'm going to go ahead and open to the four requests for comment that we have. I'm going to start with Karen Silverstrom. If you wouldn't mind coming up to the microphone.
Hi, Karen
Afternoon.
Silverstrom, 430 West College. We are interested in the occupancy rules being enforced because they are regularly violated. They're currently violated all around my neighborhood. And the excuse we always hear is, oh, there's only 2 on the lease, oh, there's only 4 on the lease, yet under the table they're collecting rent from all of them. And we need something with some teeth in it to really get these landlords to realize you can't keep doing this. You know, when this 4-2 law was written, there should have been a sunset provision. Exceptions under state law are supposed to end at some point. These aren't ending. We've got more rentals than ever, and we've got apartments popping up all over the place. So we as neighbors need some relief. This is our lifeblood, our investment in our properties. We are constantly under battle with overoccupied properties. Properties are not taken care of. Example, just recently, the snowstorms. You could look down every street and tell which was a rental. They are not taking care of them. The students don't care, the landlords don't care, and we as property owners, we do care, you know? This, as I said, this is our investment. So whatever you can do to this law to either give it a sunset provision, to give it some teeth, to back it up with something, I mean, give these people subpoena power to go look at where the money's going, because students can tell you, oh, I've been paying rent, I'm not even living here, but the landlord won't let me out of it, while charging rent to 4 or 5 others and having it overoccupied. I mean, this is just getting ridiculous. This is the root of what's wrong in this country, is people constantly violating the law, thinking it's okay, I'll screw over somebody else in someone else's neighborhood while we suffer. I would like to see these landlords start putting some of these places right next door to where they live and see how they like it. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen.
I'll give you that one, just a minute.
Okay. I'd like to ask Mr. Chuck DeShiel to come forward.
Thank you for hearing us. I'm wordier than Karen, so apologize in advance. But the purpose of the 4-2 law was to stop the rapid progression of conversions in the single-family neighborhoods. It wasn't to be punitive or to hurt the people that already owned properties, that already had exceptions for 3 or 4. It was to stop conversions. And I went back through some records the other day, and I'm going to jump a little bit ahead, but on Druid Hill Avenue, there are 40 houses. And since the 4-2 went into effect, 10 houses have been converted to rentals. That's 25% of a single-family neighborhood, 10. And almost every one of them has had an occupancy issue. I will say, in fairness, not one of them that I have seen has been a SAPOA represented house. I am on the side of SAPOA to the degree that they are managing their properties for the most part as a rule, that these are people, I haven't really seen a whole lot of that issue. The issues we have and where we need teeth in this law are the people that own an individual house or 2 houses. They don't live here. They don't have anything invested. These are communities. The same thing has happened on West College Avenue since 9 houses have been converted since 4-2 out of all the houses on the street, of which many are legal rentals before that. So 9 houses have been converted since then. Several have had occupancy issues. Monticello Avenue has been under siege. That street stretches 3 blocks. There are 59 houses on Monticello Avenue, and 19 since the 4-2 law have been converted to rentals. Almost every one of them has had occupancy issues. Almost every one. And it only takes the neighbors to be able to tell the city what's going on. And it puts the neighbors in a point where we're having to tell on people, and we hate this. We like the students. We happen to live in the neighborhood where the university is. That's what causes our occupancy issues here. But there are just so many times that the students are being coached to lie to us. We know when we talk to them how many are in the house. We live near them. And we see it every day, and the students have the exact same lines. They're being coached by people who, just for profit, want to convert a house, or their parents own it, or whatever the situation is. And what a despicable thing to have students in our neighborhood and have them having to act as criminals and be criminal, to lie to us, to move their cars, to hide their cars, and they're coached. We know the words. We've heard it. They've told us. That's despicable, because this is a community, and the dollars, for the most part, are going outside of our community, because the responsible SAPOA members, these are people that manage their units. They manage each other as best they can. It's a little difficult to do, but they know the laws. But these other people know the laws, and realtors tell them, well, this is how you can get by it, put it in your name and your child's name, things like that, and they fly under the radar. We're not collecting rental fees from these people. It's not fair to the landlords in Salisbury that are paying their license fees, that are responsible, that are taking care of their properties. And after the 4-2 law, which was very divisive in our town, and particularly my neighborhood near the university, it was terrible. It pitted us against each other, friends and everything. And I think that all of a sudden it has come around to where we know we're not opposed to them. We've accepted what the exceptions were. We went forward. They did not really pressure us and add to this supply. But they are losing money because they have people from the outside coming in who don't respond to the city when the city tells them that they're overoccupied. Susan's job is almost impossible to deal with someone in New Jersey. I don't care if they have a local representative or not. That they aren't managing the property. They're just here to collect mail. It's a technicality. So, and I can tell you, with all these conversions of houses, that's a tremendous sum of houses that have transferred, and there's been a tremendous change to the neighborhoods. And for that, if they had not enacted 4-2, the neighborhoods around the university would have been practically 100% rental by now. I would stake my name on it, because the house values were right in the range. 4 people in a house at $500 a shot, that's $2,000 a month. That'll carry a huge mortgage. So almost no house is not in jeopardy of becoming a rental. So the fact that 4-2 came in, we accepted it. We were happy with that. We weren't thrilled, but that's the way it is. We like living with the college students. In my neighborhood, it's a college issue. Others, it might be different. But in our neighborhood, that's what it is. And it's not that we're opposed to them, but when the mix is becoming so huge, and we have a town that is, 60 or 70% rental, that's not healthy in our town. And we need, and almost every time I report houses for ones I see. I have never reported a SAPOA house ever for overoccupancy. I haven't had to, because they seem to be responsible. I have, but however, I have seen all these other houses that you report and report. They know very well what to coach these kids what to say. They hide cars. They play all the games. But the neighbors know how many live there. I don't care how many cars you have parked there or any of that. You know, you live there. And then they don't respond, and they know that if they drag it out longer, you can't ever fix it. There are houses that have been overoccupied for 5, 6, 7 years, and every time they get notice, they get 60 days to respond, and then they drag it out further, and the next thing you know, the semester's over. So then they start it again next semester. That's why we need the teeth to stop these people that are basically taking money away from our local business people who are responsible in how they run their properties. There are probably more things to say, but it's probably just, I've lived here all my life, and I've lived in that neighborhood, and the college was an asset. It went to becoming a real problem. It came back to being a diverse neighborhood, and we'd like to keep it so that the law is enforceable. And the only people that are going to be against it or damaged by it are the people that intend to break the rules. That's all. So anyone who has converted since 4-2 generally has intended to break the laws, because the houses don't generally carry themselves with just 2 people. So a lot of things are very obvious to the neighbors, but the only way to find out, and if we're wrong, we're wrong. Susan can get in, she can get it straightened out. If the landlord doesn't know there's too many in there, they can get it out and go forward and everyone's happy. So it's only penalizing people who don't intend to do what they want what the law is supposed to be. And I don't have a lot of sympathy if they've bought it after the fact. If they had bought a house, like when 4 to 2 was coming about, and they had bought it thinking they could rent to 4, and then they had issues because they had bought it thinking I can have this much income, that's fine, because I'm glad that they did, for fairness' sake, not hurt them financially. But after the fact is another story. So that's where my concern is. We've got to stop these conversions when you have half of the street going to rental and is empty all summer, empty all Christmas. It creates crime, it creates dark houses. And we had a healthy mix, and we'd like to go back to a healthy mix. So I appreciate your help.
Thank you, Jeff. Next, I'd like to invite Sharon DeShiel.
First, I'd like to thank the council, President Day, and the members for allowing us to be a part of this work session and give you our feedback. The nice thing that has happened in the last few years, Chuck referred to the 4 to 2, this type of thing, is that the neighbors where I am, and I'm 1103 Russell Avenue, we get along beautifully with a lot of the landlords because the landlords, we feel we're all in this together. And by having a work session such as this, where people can communicate how they feel, I think it sends the message to everyone that we're all on the same page, we're all hearing the same message, and therefore there really is no excuse for you not following the guidelines. Susan, my hat goes off to you and your staff for vigilantly trying to address this over occupancy, because it seems to have really taken on a life of its own, more so recently than it had in the past. Unfortunately, the reason we're here is because people choose not to follow the law. And therefore, we have to put a little more oomph in these laws and have more stringent consequences that are not vaguely interpreted by whomever wrote it for whatever reason. We have to keep in mind that these changes aren't for those landlords that honor the 4 to 2 guidelines, because they have nothing to lose whatever passes, because they do diligently follow the guidelines that are in place. But the landlords, the local landlords, and the out-of-town landlords who try to skirt the rules, this is where the problem lies for us. So any proposed increase in fees, fines, timelines, anything that I defer to Susan and to the council, because you're studying this, is to be put in place and to be enacted because of the ones that choose not to follow the rules. And any landlords here that follow the rules, this is kind of a moot point for all of you. We're all in this together to have our neighborhoods thrive, and the over-occupancy has got to stop. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Sharon. I'd like to ask Ms. Sarah Schall to come forward.
My name is Sarah Schall, and I get very nervous when I speak, so please excuse that. But I am a landlord who lives in the neighborhoods. I live on West College Avenue. I rent to 29 students within a half a block area, and I've been doing it for 20 years. So I am sort of a neighborhood person who wants to see the neighborhoods remain healthy. It helps to keep my property values up. I try to keep my properties up because then it keeps the neighborhood healthy. It's sort of a positive reinforcement. I want to tell one story, and that is I do have a rental house that's one house away from where I live on West College, and it was a primary residence up until maybe 2 years ago. And I had always been friends with the landlord that bought it. Somewhere about this time last year, I called them and I said, you know, you guys have 3 people living in there. You have 3 guys living in there, and they're having some bad parties. The front yard's torn up. They said, no problem, we'll take care of it. And they did. They came in within 2 days and took care of the problems, called me and said, we read the Riot Act, there's not gonna be any more problem, but I never heard them mention about the third person that was in there. It's only legally allowed to have two or a family. So I waited, I thought, well, maybe they took care of it. So I waited maybe a week and I called them back and I said, you know, you've got 3 guys living in there. You really do. I mean, I'm a landlord being helpful to another landlord. And they said, well, how do you know that? What's the proof? And I said, I walk my dog every day at 6 in the morning, 10 o'clock at night. It's the same 3 cars. You have 3 guys living there. And the response that I got was really surprising. It's like, we told them to only park 2 cars there. And I thought, whoa, seriously? And so I said, don't do this. Don't put us on opposite sides. We've been friends. Let's be on the same side. Don't rent to 3 guys in there. And the response was sort of immature in my thoughts of it. And I thought, whoa, this is not good. And so I said, I have to report you to the city. I will report you to the city. I don't want to do that. Don't do this to us. And so I ended up calling, because SAPOA is a good group. And they really do want to manage their own. They want to. I don't think they're able to. I think peer-to-peer policing does not work. It is hard to stand face-to-face with your neighbor and say, you're over-occupying, please stop. 1, there's no repercussion from that. And 2, it creates a problem from 2 people. So I think it has to be the city that does the policing on this. Not that SAPOA wouldn't want to. Peer-to-peer policing is just not effective. And so I called the other landlords on my street, West College. They're very responsive landlords. TJ Maloney. I talked to Laura. She said we would never do that. I said, could you speak with this landlord, because I don't want to report them. I'm a landlord, for God's sake. But give me an option. Will you talk to him? And I spoke with Dr. Horn, also another landlord. He said, oh, that's really terrible, but I'm not comfortable saying anything to them. And then I spoke with Blair Vernier, very responsive, but he said, oh, it's a terrible problem. I would never over-occupy. We don't, which I know, because I live in the neighborhood, but I'm not comfortable really speaking with them. And I spoke with the president of SAPOA, Brent, who is a very good guy. And I think he did speak with these landlords, but I don't think it was to any effect. And this is a landlord that has bought 4 houses that were primary residents on my block in the last 4 years. 2 of those houses have been brought up for over-occupancy in 2 years. So this is not good for me as a neighbor, and it's not good for me as a business owner to have illegal competition that's really sort of messing up the whole neighborhood, of which my neighbors are my friends. So I wrote to I did call, thank you so much, I did call the city, I did report it. I let the landlord know that I was going to, that they could expect it. And I thought, I wonder if these tenants know it all. You know, there are kids here that are just here for a few years. It's not their issue, you know. So I wrote him a note, and I put it in the mailbox. And I said, your house is over-occupied. I did report it to the city. I don't know if you know about the law, but if you want to, please come down. I'm happy to sit and talk with you. And all 3 of them showed up the next day. And they were very anxious. They were a little anxious. And we sat down and talked about it. And they said, Miss Sarah, we don't know what to do. Here we are. The house was advertised as a 3-bedroom house. The price was for 3 individual people, like $1,500, which is a 3-person price. 2 people are not going to pay. I mean, it is a 3-person price. 2 people are not going to pay $750. each. It doesn't, and then carry the utilities for a fairly large house. They can't do it. And so they said, but we were shown the house as a 3-bedroom close to college for students. It was advertised as a 3-bedroom close to college for students. We went to see it. Everything was fine until we sat down to sign the lease. When we sat down to sign the lease, and our parents were on board with it because they have to sign as well, the landlords told us, we're only going to put 2 on the lease. And they said, but we're 3. And they said, it was like a nudge, nudge, wink, wink. We're not going to say anything as long as you guys keep it quiet there. And they said, what we did was we signed a 2-year lease on this house because it was so perfect close to college. Now, because you've turned us in, our landlord has called us and told us we have to move to another one of their properties. Not a property that they rented, but to another property to honor the 2-year lease. They said we had paid upward almost $2,000 in a security deposit. We have signed for 2 years with these landlords. We are in such jeopardy of financial ruination if we don't play ball with them. They could kick us out and still press us to pay for the rest of the lease. What do we do? What do we do? And I know this is not a new story. It's not, I don't think it's prevalent, but I think it happens. And so I said, please let me give you the numbers of the people in the city who can help you. Please go tell this story. You are not, they sort of are complicit because when they were told we're only going to put 2 on, they could have asked some questions, but they're kids who just want to get through college, you know what I mean? And they're having landlords who are adults telling them it's okay. And so I said, I'm perfectly willing to put you in touch with people who need to hear your story. And they said, we have fear. We have fear of this landlord and retaliation. We have fear for the money that we have signed for an additional, it was probably 14 months at that time. They said, can we tell you we will voluntarily reduce to 2 people? Just please let us get through our exams. And I said, I've already reported it. I mean, I can write them and write the city and tell them what you've told me, that you voluntarily, but I mean, that's not going to help anyone else. It'll just get you through exams. And so I said, would you tell your story? And they said, no, we can't while we're under this landlord's $2,000 deposit, 14 more months of rent. Our parents, you know, it's just, we didn't know. So I wrote the city and I said, this is what's happened. They said they volunteered, and they did. They did for about 2 months. It got them through the rest of their lease. So their landlord got the increase in rent from 2 people to 3 people. So rather than like 1,000, they probably got like 1,500, you know, for the remainder of their lease. And nothing really was able to be done. About 2 weeks after that, the same landlord put a for rent sign up in a house, in front of a house that had always been a primary residence, but now was going to be a rental. And they made the rent on their website $1,500. That is a 3-person rate. The rates in our area, which are the highest probably outside of University Park and all, are probably between $500 and $550 per person for a house. So you can see a 3rd increase for an illegal rental is sort of, it sort of makes some landlords want that extra 30% that's illegal. So anyway, I looked on their website, it's for $1,500. And I called the landlord again. And as I said, we had always been friends in the past. So it was sort of hard for me and shocking. And I said, please, do not put 3 people in that house. I will report you. I don't want to be in that situation. I want us to be on the same side. And the response was sort of, why are you looking at our website? I do that for for my market research, for my own, you know? And I said, just don't do it. Oh, well, they're related. Do you know that that's the right, do you know that that law is correct, the way you're interpreting it? No, we know it is. Well, it turns out then, now we've got 4 houses that were primary residents, which means residents keeping their yards nice, putting up Christmas decorations, looking like they're inhabited, that are now rentals, that are over-occupied. And I think that if you find that there is a landlord that seems to have this as a pattern, seems to have illegally over-occupying their rentals as part of their business plan, they have to be stopped. It has to have teeth. If you find that one landlord has more than 1 or 2 that are being turned in, every time they rent an illegally over-occupied rental, it is slashing the throat of every other landlord who is legally doing it in this area. That has been the land grab that has started in the last 6 years. It has started because the town, with its best intentions, put in 4 to 2 after a lot of struggle between good people. And the majority of the landlords understand and are sticking by being legal landlords. But there are some that are out there grabbing land thinking nobody's doing anything. It takes them 6 months to get students out of a house. I'm happy to give you guys the contact information for one of the kids that I talked to, but I don't know if they're still under that fear of having to lease from that landlord. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, if we have a balance in our area between student rentals that are well managed and the families that live on the block, the permanent people that live on that block 12 months a year, most people are very happy with that. Most people on my street and in that area are connected with the college. They love the students. They love the energy. But if you have an unregulated, unmanaged rental, it can destroy lifestyles. And if you have people that know that they can over-occupy without being caught in any way, they just scoot their renters through that month, or they're not even on the hook at all. They put their student rentals, really unsophisticated students, on the hook for having more people, and they've kept their hands clean. It's not right. So I say that what you've proposed, with if you find a rental that you know has been illegally over-occupied, whether it's by a landlord here in town or by a family that has bought something for their kids from out of town and put 3 people in it because it carries their mortgage, then they need to be shut down quickly. 3 months for the first time on a unit is very fair. It will hurt. The second being 6 months, I promise you, it will stop it. The majority of the landlords here in town, they do the right thing, but they're being manipulated. The landlord that I'm talking about is the very most recent ex-president of SAPOA. So it's not a person who does not know the rules. It is not a person who did not have to go through 4 to 2 fighting. It is not a person who is misinterpreting anything other than, I can get away with it, and so I will. That's it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Next, I'd like to invite, this was my question earlier. I think we've got a 3-legged team, if I.
Oh, very nice.
Alita Davis and Kay Gibson on. Okay, I have you on one piece of paper there, so I wasn't sure.
I just couldn't get another piece.
Okay, understood. I was trying to figure that out.
All right.
Ms. Davis.
First of all, I do want to thank the landlords who are doing what they're supposed to because, sorry, pain. Every town needs rental properties, as we all know, who have started out renting a house and saving the money to buy a house. But I want to come at this a little bit differently. I guess because of where I'm working with the various nonprofits, I'm in contact with a lot of older people because they're the only ones who have the free time basically to get involved. And I hear so many things I didn't know were still happening. And the way I am looking at this right now is a victimization of our elder population by these overpopulated houses. And I'm not talking about some of the poorer neighborhoods in town or even the lower end of Camden, which for years has been, rentals and not a very good place to live. I'm talking about the nice places like Pinehurst Avenue, all the beautiful little family neighborhoods off of the upper part of College Avenue where the professors live and where many of the college students maybe grew up. These are people who raised their families here, they earned the money, they bought their properties in beautiful neighborhoods where they felt safe and secure. And now I am hearing that Pinehurst Avenue, there was a crack house across from two professors that lived there, elderly. As far as what I heard was nothing was ever done with the students, either by the college or the police, to the knowledge of the people that lived there. People on one of the other small streets off of Camden saying that there is a constant problem with these parties that run, as all college students know, from Wednesday or Thursday through Sunday morning, so that they're not getting any sleep. They can't come out and sit on their porch anymore because of what's going on. They don't want to look at what's going on across the street and down the street. They are afraid to walk in their neighborhoods anymore. When I was a young mother, with a divorced mother with a child to support, I lived in one of the Mitchell Street, not a very good neighborhood. Now the college owns, or the hospital owns most of it. I had to sleep with a pistol under my pillow because from my bedroom window, I watched somebody climb up the porch across the street and go on the roof and climb in the second-story window, which would have been right where my bedroom window was. I watched water gushing out of the side window of the house for an entire day like a waterfall across the street. I walked into a home where there was a party going on. I could walk in, the doors are all open. And as you know, in the college neighborhood, when you're having a party, you just go to the house with the doors open and they're having a party. And not one person I talked to in the house either lived there or even knew who lived in the house. Another home across the street, there were, I called the police, it was like 5 o'clock in the morning, I had to get up at 6:30, I hadn't had any sleep. There were 300 people that came out of that house. Another house had a keg party, and were selling tickets for $5 a piece, and the second floor completely fell down into the living room of the house from so many people in that house. Now, I want to ask any landlords if they would want their grandmother or grandfather living in these neighborhoods where they can't sit out in their porch, they can't go in the backyard because, or they just don't want to be there because the neighborhood is full of trash. And I mean, not just debris, I mean humankind as well. And you don't need to tell me these are children. When I was their age, I was married, was getting ready to have a child, and I was running my own business. So I do not think that there should be any slack cut because they're college students. College is not a playpen time, that's kindergarten. You're a responsible adult when you're in college. The police regard you as one, the college regards you as one. And I am just so upset by what I keep hearing from people about their neighbor. Their house is gone, there's no value, they can't enjoy their neighborhood anymore, and they don't feel safe in their home. They don't want to move, can't move, or they are tied to the neighborhood through their community, their doctors, their children or grandchildren. And many of them are just not unable to move, and if they do try to move, the houses are worth nothing. when they go to sell them. They can't even get a two-bedroom condominium for the price of their beautiful home that they treasured and worked so hard for. So I hope you will keep this in mind, and I
Thank you.
wish we would finally get this stopped. I've been 30 years hoping this would change. So, think about our older people and the people who built the community and the
Thank you.
town of Salisbury, please.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Ms. Gibson?
Kay Gibson. I live in Newtown on Isabella Street. It's not the landlords that are licensed landlords that I have a concern with. When it snowed, most of them had the front of the sidewalks cleared. Yes, there's one that never does and doesn't maintain the house, but that's another issue. My concern are with those houses that are not licensed to rentals, but are turning into boarding houses. I have one across from me, and I think we need to include this in here. We need to do something with those that are not licensed to regulate them.
Okay, we've got to keep it on topic just because
Okay,
we're on
well,
limited time.
it is on topic when it's over occupancy. And
But let's talk about licensed and registered units.
then how do we get these properties registered if indeed they are renting out rooms? And it is over occupancy. One person will buy and 4 families will move in. They should be licensed. And if they're not licensed, that falls right into this. They need to be regulated and they need to be licensed. They can't be licensed because it's a single family area that cannot be converted into multifamily. So what are we going to do to get rid of these properties or get them licensed and regulated? Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next we have Ms. Kate Manizade.
Thanks for letting me speak. I live at 500 West College Avenue. We've been there, this is our 20th year, and we bought our house because we couldn't afford the rents. And since we bought in 1995, we've watched the rentals just consume West College Avenue. I have 2 dogs. I'm out morning and night. I see what's going on. I'm a light sleeper. And the change in the neighborhood has not been for the better, even in spite of 4-2. I would suggest that Susan Phillips probably needs more people to help her and more clout behind the law. Somehow we have to do better than what we're doing. But I would also say there's got to be a tax angle to this. Some of these overoccupied houses may be collecting rent under the table. My son has friends who are renting from a local proprietor of a brewery. He was collecting cash rent from them. The house was overoccupied. They acted like animals and irritated the neighbors. I think this was on Middle Boulevard. And what happened was they went after him on Facebook. And now that there's social media, you're going to start to see the students fighting back because they're starting to realize they're being taken advantage of. Just a thought. They didn't go to the IRS, but they could have. So people who are in violation of the 4-2 are often taking rent under the table. And I would say there is a tax aspect to that. And the other thing I would just say is something I pointed out when 4-2 was enacted. I was not strictly in favor of it because my husband and I bought our house, we fixed it up, and I would never break the law knowingly, having seen the consequences to our town. We owe a lot to Salisbury. Our kids grew up here. But should we wish to rent the house now, it's a 4-bedroom house with 2 bathrooms, we can't rent to more than 2 people. It's just, we have essentially been squeezed out of a market by the 4-2 law, and yet we're living with the consequences of over-occupancy and conversions. So to agree with what you were saying, Ms. Gibson, about the consequences for older people, you know, we're starting to view ourselves as falling in that category. We could probably get out from under our house if we had to. We could probably walk away from it. But I would never do that to our neighbors. We have our nice little block of Russell. We want to keep it that way. And I'm sorry that there are people like on Monticello that are trapped. There aren't enough neighbors to fight back. I think it takes a block-by-block approach. The block plan is a good one where neighbors can band together and self-police their block. If you notice, there haven't been a lot of these conversions on the Claremont Avenue, North and South Claremont, because the neighbors band together and shut it down. And that's what you're seeing here, but there are some places where people are too busy and they can't do it. So just a couple of points there. One is the tax angle. The other is social media. The responsible landlords have nothing to fear, but what I think is going to happen is the students are wising up and they're going to fight back. And the case that I mentioned about Middle Boulevard, they wanted their security deposit back and he wouldn't give it to them. They held him out to dry on Facebook. He went after them and said, "You're hurting my business." They said, "Give us our security deposit," and he did it. Once the students realized that they're being packed, say, 4 to a house, we had a case on Druid Hill with 8. 429 Druid Hill, as you know, had 8 in it, and they were dealing drugs, and it's a racket. So anyway, I'll stop blabbing. I've lived with this 20 years. I could talk probably about it for 20 years. I like to thank the SAPOA landlords who are in compliance. I know it's a headache and it's expensive. Sarah's properties are a model for what I think a rental should be in this town. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Kate. Next, I'd like to invite Brian Records to come forward.
I'll try to be brief, but I speak from a unique aspect in the fact I'm a neighbor to these people that have spoken and also work with the city, so I see firsthand. The topic that I'm looking at, they speak of the quality of life issues. What I would tend to speak on is some of the things that are the life safety issues. I know I routinely call on Susan when Tom was there. As recently as just last Wednesday, we had a fire in a home that should have at the most had 5 people, had 10. It was a raging fire that just by luck, nobody got injured or killed. We had a fire on Hazel Avenue where there were 10 people. They were literally leaping out the windows when we pulled up. Once again, we got lucky, nobody was killed or injured. There's quite a few of these, and I know in '93, Chief Higgins started a program where we went door to door and we offered free fire inspections, and we would routinely then, we would find over occupancy, we would find a variety of things, and I would agree with them. The folks from SAPOA were very good. Mr. Lear, Ms. Bratton, all I had to do was pick up the phone, tell them what I found, and it was usually solved within a very short order of time. So the main thing is with most of these kids, they really, to put it bluntly, they don't care. They're paying their money, they're gonna live there, they got other things to worry about. It's the landlords, really, it's their responsibility, and the way that has to take effect has to take effective neighbors reporting this, and it takes efforts of Susan, and when Tom was there, for instance, we had all that went on in the Druid Hill Avenue, started in September right out of the gate, and you knew it was over occupancy. It wasn't hard to tell when you had cars hanging out of the driveway over the sidewalk. So quickly they organized, had meetings, discussed it, went through the chain that we had to deal with legally, and I'm proud to say today that neighborhood has taken a dramatic change for the better. So I would encourage you to give her all the support she needs for the over occupancy, because with these fires I'm talking about, we say in our business, God loves Salisbury, but it's just a matter of time before we're going to be front page news, and it isn't going to be pretty. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you, Brian. Okay. Those are all the requests that I have so far for comment. All good, Kim? So returning to council discussion, first on the resolution with the adoption of the proposed policy changes, and secondly, we'll come to the ordinance. I think there's less to discuss there. Open it up to council for any comments at this time.
Still absorbing.
I'm happy to weigh in. At this point in time, I mean, given everything that we've talked about up to this point, given the fact that council has passed the ordinance at first reading unanimously, I think, again, just to pick up on something that Chief Records said there, quality of life is fundamental and is critical, and so is our relationship to the university. And the university has been, as I understand it, and has been repeated in this room many times, a fantastic partner this year, better than years past. In the, I think as Chuck and Sharon can attest, in the neighborhood, in the town gown meetings, the university has, has a better reputation in our neighborhood than they have had in terms of the way they've addressed the problem. And speaking as a resident of Druid Hill, I can tell you, they coming down with the hammer was helpful in reducing the issues that we had there, which were behavioral first and foremost, but also speak to the over-occupancy issue. So the university role is critical here. I don't think the question is at all about whether this ordinance passes, but whether we have the right tools and whether or not they will function effectively to hold accountable those who intend to thumb their noses at the law. And as has been said many times, there are plenty of landlords and property owners in this city who have no intention of breaking the law. And if they found that there was an unknown over-occupancy, they would address it without delay. So the question to me is, do we have the policy here for your department that effectively helps you ensure that those who intend to thumb their nose at the law will be held accountable, and that those who are notified that there's an issue are given an opportunity to make a correction in a relatively quick period of time, the 10-day period that we've discussed over and over again. And the only questions that I have there are the ones I brought up before we heard from the public, which is, is the first offense, second offense, third offense, suspensions effective? What's the period of time that's effective? And you said that goes with the ownership of the property, which makes sense. And then the second question was, is there any impact on the landlord license, any ability to bridge from one property to another if you've got someone who is a repeat violator citywide? And those are more questions than answers. I don't know whether or not there's a way to address that. Ms. Mitchell brought up some points about how that might be difficult, but I think it's something that we need to continue to explore. And if we're really talking about, landlords who only own one or two properties, that may not be an issue. But I think we need to know whether or not we've got a situation there and the tools to address it.
Right, and I think Mr. Stevenson made the comment earlier that the actual language of the ordinance would permit us, for example, Ms. Schall's example of the landlord who literally was conspiring to violate the law. We have a provision right now in this ordinance, or with this proposed change, that would allow you to go after the license of that landlord.
Is that 15.26? Is that
26110? And I think that's probably an example where that would be an appropriate use of the law, and there may even be a criminal violation there for conspiracy.
Okay.
I meant to mention that conspiracy side of it, and thank you for that.
Any other comments or questions?
Yeah, I have a couple of things.
Mr. Heath?
I think this is a prime case of 95-5 principle. We spend 95% of our time dealing with 5% of the population or less. So I want to commend the landlords that are doing the right thing. I also want to second Brian's comments about safety. We can't talk about it enough. You don't want to see a death and a fire. It's just something that shouldn't happen. But I think Brian's right. The odds are against us in terms of numbers. The other thing that I also want to point out is, let's understand that being a landlord is a business. And all businessmen are held to certain levels and laws. And I will just cite one that I think I cited before, but I think it's worthwhile. Businesses, when I was in the chemical industry, the federal EPA laws were very, very stringent. There were no excuses. You couldn't say, I didn't know. It was my responsibility as the president of the company to say, it is my accountability on all areas to make sure that my business runs according to the law. Ignorance is not an excuse, and never will be, and certainly is not an excuse in the legal system. So I firmly believe in this. I think we should take a strong stance. I think that, and I agree with a couple of the comments, that if a couple of the individuals who are prime, I'll be kind, violators get nailed with a significant enough penalty, that we will control the problem eventually. It may take some time, but I think we can do it, and I fully support this.
And that's, I think, the question. Is it significant enough? I think Michelle referenced the 3-month suspension at the first offense, 6-month at the second, 12 at the third as significant. I appreciate that input. What you got? I appreciate that.
We'll stop it within 2 years.
And I hope that's right. You know, I think with any law being violated, we want to make sure that the law is effective. You know, again, I don't think there's a reasonable argument against this whatsoever. The question is, you know, is it going to be effective? You know, the law is not changing here, only the tools to implement it. I would recommend that, you know, unless there is an alternative thought on the rental unit registration effects, that we move this to, that we move the resolution to legislative session. Alternative thoughts? No?
Agree.
Okay, consensus?
Agreed.
Okay, there is council consensus. And on the ordinance, are there any comments, questions, or changes on the ordinance? Yeah, nothing's changed. No. Okay. Anything else with regard to the presentation of the ordinance? No? Okay. And I recommend we move swiftly to get the ordinance to second reading so that we don't have to reissue it for first reading.
Pushing the 60 days, aren't we?
We're getting close.
It's on the agenda for Monday night.
Okay.
Yeah.
That should be no problem. All right?
That's pretty swift.
And in reference to the note I passed you during the public comments, I don't expect that this will be codified, nor do I want it to be, but considering that there are going to be 5 distinct districts in the city coming up after our next election, each council member is going to be responsible for that district. I would like Neighborhood Services and Code Compliance to provide a memorandum to each one of those council members to keep him or her abreast of what the violations are in this area.
I wonder if just as a matter of our quarterly report, if it could be broken down by district, by electoral district, maybe?
Right.
Yeah,
I don't think we need
it can be
to just see our district. I think we need to see citywide, but, I mean, because the districts only matter for the election. Beyond that, everything we do is citywide. So.
Well, I think, you know, when we went on to talk about why we were having districts, you know, one of your arguments was that, you know, here we have this group of people who have similar needs and et cetera, and I think that, you know, we have some measure of husbandry when we come to looking at our districts, as well as the city as a living organism.
Right, but if I only get my district, I won't know what's going on in your area.
Oh, sure, but I want to know what's going on in my district.
Right, but I'd want to see the whole
like
city. I'd want to
8 feet.
see all 5 districts,
Sure.
is what I'm saying.
I
Quarterly?
understand.
Quarterly report.
Well, I'm just thinking that's a mechanism that we already have in place for reporting.
That's very easily done. I just need a map and I can integrate that GIS-wise into ComCate, and I can do that.
Jack Lennox just
Yeah,
left.
I can handle it. It's very easy.
But we can connect you.
Okay. I'll get it from Tom. It's easily done.
I'm just teasing. Thank you, Susan. Thanks for everything.
Thank you.
Mr. Tillman, thank you very much. And just to ensure that we are official, the ordinance number 2313, is there council consensus to move that to legislative session Monday?
Yes.
All right. To the residents, members of the public who came out, thank you very much. Thank you for your input. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. Next item on our agenda is the, excuse me. Nope, not yet, not quite. The draft legislation to eliminate primary elections and change the number of councilmanic districts in the city. Mr. Tillman, I'm going to invite you back up here.
See you, Mr. Spees.
If all goes well. We'll just give it a second for the background noise to die down. I know. All right.
Just,
Mr. Tillman.
just as in addition to discussing this issue, the requirement that we file with U.S. District Court regarding the redistricting that's taken place, I just wanted to let the council know that we've now run that by the ACLU attorneys as well as internally with Frank McKenzie, gotten back everyone's comments, and we're going to be ready to roll. So,
okay.
Just an update on that.
So it's ready to go to the court, or it has
Yeah,
to go to the court?
I had really had no objections to any of the suggestions by the ACLU lawyers, so I'm going to go ahead and make those changes and let her go.
So that gets filed then?
We would file jointly with the ACLU, and I think I mentioned earlier, I think they're going to have to find a client, but I'm going to leave that up to them.
Okay. So what's our timeline for submitting that then? Will that be within?
As soon as they have a client, we're done, I think. So, and I'll call.
Can they hold us, I mean, can they hold us up on that? I mean, is it?
No, I don't think that's anyone's intent, and
Okay.
I don't think it's going to be hard to find someone.
Okay, all right. Just wanted to make
But
sure.
Technically, the client that they used to have is no longer
Right.
party to the case. He's left
Right.
the area,
Right, but-
so.
Right.
Anyway.
I guess I just want to make sure that
I would think that, you tell me, if we submit it to the court for approval and they don't have a client, what would they do? They'd either approve it or say you're no longer, throw out the
Well, just
consent decree.
technically, I can't really present something to the court as though they still have a client. I have to be, honest and truthful. So I can't say that I have the agreement of the other side if technically the other side doesn't have a client, so that's.
Right, but we have an order from the court to
Yes.
comply with this, and
Yes.
we're complying with the order,
We
not
could
with the
submit
client.
it. We could submit it
and
with
the
or
other
without
party.
their approval.
That's what
ourselves.
I would do at this point. I mean,
Yeah.
we are, it's my opinion, because we're really pushing up against the wall here, I think.
The only reason, because we're sort of on board with both sides, I'm really not even concerned that the court approve it. I think as long as we've kept everything out in the open and both sides are in agreement and it's submitted to the court, I wouldn't feel that we would be doing anything.
And when
illegal.
Mr. Rodriguez was here, I mean, he agreed that we're not really up against the wall anymore. We've done the hard part.
Okay.
We've done the thing that we needed to do that had a very strict timeline. And this is really, almost a formality at this point,
At
given
this point,
that
it's
they
become a
agree.
formality. There's no objection or opposition to what we want to do at this point. that I'm
As long
aware
as they
of.
have no client.
Yeah.
Their
Well,
new
no,
client may have one.
I think it's just
Right.
it's just a technicality, that's all.
Okay. So, all right.
All right,
Can you
so
walk us
but
through?
on another voting issue.
Yes.
We're here today because of the council's wish to eliminate the primary elections. And we just have some basic changes to SC 6-7 needed to be eliminated, which was the reference in the charter to primary elections, and that's been done. And then SC 6-15 that referred to tie elections, the reference again to primary elections needs to be eliminated. And the proposed charter amendment would accomplish that.
Okay.
And that's done by resolution, as are all charter amendments.
And I
What
don't think,
about-
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
I was just gonna say, and I don't think any, general discussion is needed, but the request for this came from, the intent to include it originally in the creation of the 5 districts, but it was not included, so kind of
I
a
can't get my
subsidiary
annotated copy
impact.
open, so I can't tell you exactly where it is, but just look at the areas around that talk about the dates for filing for office and filing for, or the swearing in. There was some question about when that would occur and whether we need to, because we moved it to the November, and if we're doing away with the primary, there was some question about when they would be sworn in now. We didn't address that when we moved it to November, but this is the last piece.
Right, not connected to the
Fundamentally.
primary, but there was still a
Right.
question of when that,
Right, but there were.
when
the
there would be a
dates-
swearing in.
The dates about when you had to file by were connected to the elimination of the primary, but then there was also a question about when they would be sworn in, since we've moved it to November.
I hadn't had anyone raise that issue, at least that I could recall before, but I think the swearing in is tied to the day after the election, I think.
Right, but I think
Is there an issue there?
Anthony
If there was, I
Gutierrez
wasn't
brought
aware.
up something about the
He did.
time for counting. It was, actually, I know what it was. It was related to the overseas ballots, of whether we had enough time in there to allow for the changes in the laws required by because they have to allow more time now.
If we're gonna fix it, we should do it
That's what I'm,
So I
in
need-
conjunction
I'll-
with this.
I'll have
Yeah.
a conference with him.
yeah, just
see
to
what
make sure that
issue
we
is.
have it.
Overseas ballots was where the issue was.
That's where
Okay.
the change in that law regarding overseas ballots, whether it applied to a local election or not, and if that would change our swearing-in date post-election.
As for the filing deadline, that language is not struck here, so that would remain in. However, the thing we need to do is just look at the language about the filing deadline and see if it's associated with the primary or the general.
The filing deadline?
Yeah.
It's associated with the general.
Okay, so we don't need to make a change.
All right, good, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. And then the only other thing in that one, let's see, the one that we just looked at was the reference to B is eliminated, so now it just begins general election. There is no reference to A, primary election.
Okay.
And then the next section that would be amended is 1.08.020. This would be an ordinance, and the reference there to the primary would be eliminated. Under 1.12.030, the $250 breakdown between the primary and general election, or referring to both would be eliminated. So
Okay.
it would be $250
Total.
total.
Got it.
Yes. And then the other significant thing would be under 1.12.040, the 7 days prior to the primary election would be eliminated. And then down under subsection C, the reference to primary and general election, so it'll be just the reference, it'll be $600 for the election, singular. And under C, the reference to primary elections and 7 days prior to the would also be eliminated.
Okay.
So there will only be a reference in the future to the general election.
Is Brenda Colgrove going to join us when we pass this?
And
This is something she's been,
Advocated for years and years and years.
And then the third reference is for 1.08.300, and that there is just an elimination in the code to the one councilmanic district per council member. Technically, I mean, we're doing this more as a cleanup provision because to the extent that this disagreed with the charter controlled anyway, it's not mandatory that we do it, but obviously we don't want anything inconsistent in the code.
understood. Questions, comments? Consensus to move this to legislative session?
Yep.
Well, we have this charter change. Oh, no, this is the ordinance part. Which part are you talking about?
The,
Charter
both
change
ordinances
requires-
and the charter change.
A charter change has to be advertised, right? And public hearing. Right.
Yeah.
So we can't move that one yet.
No, yeah, that's what we do. We move it to
Well-
legislative session.
That's, yeah, okay.
That all
Make sure-
happens.
We missed an advertisement before, I just want to make
That
sure
all
that
happens
we
in legislative session.
remember the,
With an appropriate advertisement.
right, and hearing. Okay,
So,
So is there consensus?
yes.
All right.
Sorry. I'm not
And-
trying to confuse, I'm just
all good.
confused today.
It's all good.
I will speak to the supervisor of elections and make sure we get that other issue straightened out, and I'll report back to the council.
Okay.
Whatever
Yeah.
needs to be done.
I think
Either
we
or
left
to
it that
Kim, through Kim to the
That's
council.
fine, that's
I
fine.
think we left it that he was checking whether it applied to local elections.
Okay.
March 23rd? Does that give you enough time, Kim?
It does. Yes.
Fine with us, I think. Yes,
Okay. Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Next item on our agenda is the Tri-County Council Annexation Agreement. I'll invite Mr. Jakubiec and Mr. Holland back up. And the applicants as well. Absolutely. Welcome. How are you?
Good.
Nice to
How are
see you
you?
again.
Yeah, good to see you.
Hasn't been long. How are you?
Great.
Welcome.
Okay.
Floor is yours.
Okay. Mr. Day and members of the council, we're here to check in with you on an annexation that we've referred to as the Walston Switch Road Tri-County Council annexation. It's 27.6 acres east of the city's boundaries, just north on Route 50 from the college. We have Jeff Harmon from Becker Morgan here, and he's holding up an illustration of the existing conditions, largely existing conditions out there on the site. Tri-County Council hosts its bus station and offices on that site now. The existing building is about 7,200 square feet, and parking facility. There's also a. Oh, here. Okay. But we're at a stage now where we have a draft annexation agreement, a fiscal impact note, and a survey completed, as well as the annexation agreement. So, and we've also drafted the annexation plan, which is required by state law to have in place before an annexation can take place. So at the end of this particular session, if the council would like to go forward, the next step would be to move this to a legislative session where you would consider a resolution for annexation, and you would consider whether to set a public hearing date. After the public hearing date, the annexation would become effective if the council approved it. So you've had a chance to review these materials. Would you like to just have me summarize the annexation agreement as it is now? And then
A summary would be great.
quick summary. The principal elements of the annexation agreement are that its proposed zoning for the property would be mixed-use, non-residential. No residential development would be allowed on the parcel. It would be entirely commercial, governmental, and institutional. There are two parcels of land contained in the annexation. One is the existing use, its buildings and outbuildings and parking. The other is a vacant parcel, a separate parcel, that is not being developed actively, but could conceivably become developed. It is closest to Walston Switch Road at the immediate intersection of Walston Switch and Route 50. This annexation doesn't change those conditions. It simply means that if this annexation took place, there would be two parcels brought in rather than just one. On page 4 of the annexation agreement is the section under section 8 that deals with most of the development conditions. the conditions that the council would place on an annexation. The owner agrees that any plan for parcel 740, which is that small parcel I just referred to, would contain a plan for a planted landscape buffer designed to provide filtered views along the site and the buildings from Route 50, so that there be some establishment of the filtered views, keeping the rural forested edge consistent throughout the corridor there. The owner agrees to pay a development assessment to the city in the amount of $13,000 prior to the issuance of the building permit on construction of 740. So if that parcel were to develop in private use or private commercial use, the owner would, the city would treat that parcel just like it treats the parcels across the street on the most recent annexation on the south side of Route 50. So that development assessment would be available for the city to use in beautifying existing neighborhoods and doing infrastructure repair, et cetera. On page 5, under subsection F, the applicant would comply with the city's requirements for LEED design and seek to bring the building into compliance with LEED Silver certification after discounting those points that simply can't be met by virtue of the fact that it's so far removed from the central core of Salisbury. But this reflects a good faith effort towards meeting energy efficiency and environmental performance in building design. And it's this model that was used recently in the Smith Merritt Mill Road annexation. Lastly, and perhaps most importantly, the owner would, as a result of the annexation, agree to build and extend the wastewater and public water facilities from the current terminus on the opposite side of Route 50 under the highway and size those facilities to accommodate future connections on this side of Route 50.
Can we take a break and focus
Yes.
on that for a minute?
Of course.
All right, because that I think is the most critical question in my mind. The provision of wastewater and water services across Route 50 opens up opportunities for other connections in the commercial park, the business park, as well as in the neighborhoods in that area where there's failing septic, failing septic, and there are issues that could be remediated by connecting to city water and sewer. So I think the question that I have is, given that that's a long way off, and given that there would be an oversized pipe design under 50, is there a mechanism or a way to use that pipe when it's significantly oversized and the flow isn't going to connect appropriately? Yeah, let's talk to the engineer here.
Yeah, this is Jeff Harmon with Becker Morgan Group, civil engineer. We've talked with the City of Salisbury Public Works Department on how we can accommodate that. And what we've agreed to do is, at this time, you're absolutely right about having a too large of a diameter pipe wouldn't work at this time. So what we've agreed to do is put a casing pipe in that would allow the city to come in the future when they need to put the larger pipe in. And for now, we're putting a small diameter pipe that's sized appropriately for the Tri-County Council complex. And so at the time that the city comes along to make those connections and need that additional capacity, they'll simply be able to remove the smaller diameter pipe inside the casing and slide in their larger diameter that they need, and all that infrastructure will be in place for them on the sewer side.
So in layman's terms, the casing pipe is an outer shell that holds that structurally allows for other things to happen within it.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. And does it require, I mean, I saw that you included at some point in here, I'm not sure exactly where, but you did include estimated flow, estimated wastewater treatment demand. I think I found it.
Yes.
9,030 to 12,160 gallons per day for the existing development. Does that amount, would that require any sort of new pump facility or anything like that? Or
Tri-County Council will be building a pump station on their property, capable of pumping all of the flows to serve their site, as well as a little bit of extra capacity in case there's any future expansion that they have on their site. That station, where it needs to be located, where all the existing pipes are for their site, doesn't lend itself to connections to other areas, so this isn't a regional station. It serves just the Tri-County Council property, but it is sized to handle all of their flows, and
potentially the development on parcel 0740
Correct.
as well?
Yes.
Okay.
Does that include the flows, the estimated flows for the bus wash?
It does, yes. A majority of the water for the bus wash is recycled. They use 80% recycled water, but for the portion that is wasted in each cycle, that it does include all of that.
I didn't mean to break your rhythm.
No, that's where I was headed, and that's perfect, perfect ground to cover. I've moved through the annexation agreement fairly quickly, though, and we've moved right into the annexation plan, where the extension of services is discussed, and that is the principal extension of service item worth discussing. The last document, a one-page memo from me to the council, is the standard fiscal note that we prepare. And this annexation, unlike others that you've prepared, does not result in a positive fiscal impact. It simply can't because of its public nature and that it's tax exempt. So it's been the policy of the city to support annexations that do contribute a fiscal impact, positive. Having said that, that is one element of many that you often consider. And as has been brought up tonight, this annexation does provide for an extension of services to serve the municipal growth area in Salisbury that's planned for future connections.
So the question that I would have, I don't think the Parks and Recreation, obviously not the schools, stormwater management, waste collection, roads, I don't think those impacts fiscally are going to be, or I don't think they contribute significantly to that negative number, but police and fire and EMS might. Can you talk at all about what the service or calls for service have been like at the facility? Mr. Belichico, I don't know if you can do that.
Oh, sure.
Over the lifespan of being at this location?
The police are out there maybe twice a month.
Okay.
To respond to homeless people or theft or an unruly customer. Right now, it's the sheriff's department that responds. Fire department's probably out there once a quarter for fire alarm problems or, inspections or stuff like that. Currently, we're served by the it's Parsonsburg, thank you. Fire department, volunteer fire department, under the way they subdivide the county through the Fire Chiefs Association.
Sure. That may change or may not change.
Yeah.
That's a different ball of wax. But, okay, all right, that gives me a good sense. That's not a significant number of calls.
And the project may very well result in a fiscal positive when and if the property up front develops.
Right.
Particularly if it's an office use.
Can you point to that, by the way, on this?
Oh, yeah, thank you.
Right in the corner when you.
Is that it?
Yeah.
It's in the front
Okay,
here.
all right.
Perhaps you see on the survey.
Also have a survey plan
Got it.
that may point it out a little bit more detail.
Right at the
There's this front corner here.
Okay.
Which would be a prime location if somebody were looking for something. So there's a possibility that could happen.
Yeah, just to be clear, the access to that parcel would be from Tri-County Way, not from
Right.
Route 50 or from Austin Switch.
Okay.
Right.
All right. Before I hand it over to council for other questions, do you have anything else that you want to offer at this stage?
Bill?
Okay. Laura,
I had
Jack?
exactly the same question you did, calls for service.
Okay.
Police and fire and EMS. As far as I knew, it was negligible. I do have one question for Mr. Tillman. I serve as the city representative for Tri-County Councils, just to disclose that, but I don't have any personal financial
stake in this or any other stake other than that, so I don't have any conflict in participating in this, I don't think.
No, and for that matter, I serve as legal advisor to the Tri-County Council as well, so I have
If I'm
had.
out, you're out.
I've had nothing to do with this from the very beginning, and I assume that that was a courtesy to me by Tri-County. They haven't even asked me to look at this, and Mr. Jakubiec normally represents the city in these matters. But, you know, if there were a conflict or a question, I would obviously assign that to someone else.
Well, hearing no other comments or questions, is there council consensus to move forward with the, and at this stage, correct me if I'm wrong, this is not yet ready to come to legislative session. This is step 4 of 226, right?
It's a step, and the next step would be for us to prepare a resolution for you to consider at a legislative session, and at that session, establish a public hearing date if you intend to go forward with that resolution.
Okay. All right. Then is there council consensus to allow our friends here to move forward to develop that resolution?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Gentlemen, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And we do need to take a 5-minute break for the switching of the DVDs on PAC 14, so we'll come back at 4:50.